The story begins at Sidon Inn, where Gail Hamilton is busy taking notes on how to improve her adventure party. His concentration is broken when the party leader calls him and, to his surprise, informs him that his contract is being terminated. The leader makes it clear that, from that moment on, Gail is no longer a member of Wolfpack. Later, the whole group is gathered around a table. Gail scratches his head in confusion while the leader tries to get his attention and insists that he hears correctly. One of the members, Kushbilbora, Paladin, bluntly announces that Gail was fired. Gail gets caught off guard and can't even finish her thinking. The woman at the party, Melissa, a light fighter, mocks him by grabbing her face and making fun of her reaction. Another member, Luke the thief, tries to stop Melissa from provoking Gail. She offers to comfort you one last time. Norris, the black wizard, snickers and suggests Gail should have seen it coming. Gail stands up and protests, asking them to give her a moment since the decision came out of nowhere. Kush questions his surprise and points out that Gail does not seem to understand why he is being released. Gail reflects on how they were together for 3 years, during which he supported the team by creating cursed items, a niche but useful skill back when they were still low rank. Still confused, Gail admits she doesn't know why. Kush mocks Gail's slowness and explains that as a cursed craftsman, Gail has the worst support job imaginable. Your cursed objects only undo monsters once and are useless. Besides, Gail is the lowest member of the group, trapped at level 31. Gail tries to defend himself, saying that although the art of the curse is not a common work, his items help them solve many searches easily. He explains how he can keep curses light, even dissipate them with proper support. He presents a passive curse necklace designed to affect monsters, but others react disgusted and ask him not to take it off. Kush Gail questions, since then and even using. Kush then says Gail they already found a replacement. Moria, Glarus, a new support wizard who mastered debuff and debuff techniques. Moria arrives and is warmly welcomed by the rest of the group. Gail tells herself she's attractive. Kush presses the point that Gail is no longer needed. As Gail steps away from the table, he can still hear others whispering behind him, saying that low-level members dragged the shrank parties and that this would eventually happen. Desperate, Gail comes back and begs for one more chance. He says there are cursed things stronger than he showed before because he didn't want to disturb the party dynamics, but now is willing to bring them out. Your offer is received with silence. They just look at him. Kush doesn't say anything, just looking at him. Gail, with tears in her eyes, asks if they are absolutely certain that they will not regret this decision. Kush confirms they are. Gail reflects on how he supported them during their journey. Although he never made flashy moves, he was proud to have completed missions beside them. He hoped to stay in the pack forever. Kush, however, advises him to stop venturing completely and open a shop of cursed items. Melissa laughs, saying that he would attract the kind of people who are in scary things. Norris jokes that if Gail opened a store, he would tell the others, incriminating her like a freak. Luke doesn't express resentment. Gail accepts everything with bitter purpose and leaves. While walking down the hall, he wonders what went wrong after all the time they spent together. He remembers how Kush said he would cover Gail's room and alimony and that he could leave now. But he also insisted on keeping Gail's share of all the ingredients of the curse, which means Gail worked for free. Gail murmurs in frustration. Looking at them one last time, he sees the group laughing together. At the door, Gail makes a decision. He pulls a scroll material. Without telling them, he had secretly incorporated some of his weapons with cursed items that increased his base statistics. He hadn't mentioned it before, knowing they'd probably complain. But maybe it was never appreciated. Gail sings her spell. A magic circle lights up, and the reaction hits it hard. His face hits and he falls to the ground, panting. Many cursed items place binding effects on your user, offering increased statistics in exchange for penalties. In this case, curses on Wolfpack's equipment improved their performance, but reduced the experience they gained and inflicted minor diseases. Gail was absorbing all the inconveniences so the rest of the party could be better. He holds hands and comments on how intense the retreat was. But it also says you feel much lighter now. With the curse lifted, The pack of wolves will lose the benefits they earn from it, but Gail doesn't care anymore. They have their new support wizard now. The rest of the group was around level 50, and he had taken about 20% of his statistical reductions each. After checking his own statistics, he sees a dramatic change. Gail Hamilton has reached level 48. Your work is still a craftsman. Your new statistics program. Stamina 1.311. Go ahead 980 magic 3,402. Agility 835 status plus 870 5 cursed slot machines 8. As a paladin, Kush had 5 force and 3 defense. Then Gale's new stats put him surprisingly high for a supporting role. Soon a woman approaches and scolds him for loitering. If he left, he should leave. Gale apologizes and leaves. He stretches, trying to figure out your next move. His broke. But he still has all the cursed equipment. Looking ahead, he sees someone drawing customers to a busy tent. The scene reminds you of what one of your ex-partners said. Maybe he should give up the adventure and open a cursed store. Gale was in conflict. As much as he resented the idea of doing exactly what his old party suggested, the idea of having his own store always remained at the bottom of his mind. A peaceful dream of living in the country, having a hardware store. A life where he could sleep whenever he wanted, eat whenever he wanted, create cursed objects of his choice, and use them freely for his own research. Now, without obligation to tie him up, that freedom was finally his. The bitterness began to fade, replaced by a spark of excitement. It was time to set up a tent, earn some travel funds, and start from scratch. Back at the Silver Wolf Inn, the remaining members of the Wolfpack were enjoying a meal. The atmosphere was light, even commemorative. Kush commented on how things were better, and Norris agreed that it was a relief not to have Gale around anymore. Although Gale was a founding member, they admitted that they had spoiled him for a long time and should have replaced him before. Moria, the new support wizard, heard in silence. They turned to her and apologized for the embarrassment. Kush explained that he and Gale returned to the early days of the party and that Gale was in the habit of messing with his equipment, sometimes adding good luck charms or other minor enhancements without permission. Their conversation was interrupted when the light suddenly turned on above them. The enchanted equipment they used began to react at once, glowing unexpectedly. Moria looked up, recognizing the effect of a sync. The others were equally confused, insecure about what triggered it. Norris observed that his magic felt weaker, and Luke noticed a strange weight on his body. Moria, so frightened, questioned what kind of high-power spell they had just been hit. Kush laughed at the suggestion that it could have been a sync. Melissa had the idea that Gale had done something. Norris wondered out loud if it was retaliation for being expelled. Luke, getting more agitated, murmured that they should have eliminated him when they had the chance. Moria, trying to understand this, reasoned that if Gale cursed them, that would be understandable. But a dissipation that didn't make sense. Magic shouldn't hurt a party, it simply removed magical effects. If this spell had affected them all simultaneously, I would have suggested that Gale had removed their long-standing charms from them. She didn't believe it was to hurt them. Kush rejected speculation with contempt. He claimed Gale couldn't do anything threatening. Melissa supported him, saying that if Gale tried anything, they would easily dominate him. Moria tried to explain that it was not an attack, but a sync, but Kush cut it cold. As party leader, he declared Gale an enemy and warned Moria to quickly learn how the pack operated. Norris threatened to burn Gale if they crossed the path again. Luke joked that Norris, as weak in magic, might not even get that. Your games have increased. Luke even joked about mutilating Gale to stop him from curses, while Norris sarcastically questioned his accuracy. Melissa commented on how low they had sunk. Kush waved it, letting the others continue. Moria, however, remained thoughtful. She felt something change, too. By the time the spell was activated, it seemed that his stats had fallen, almost as if a passive impulse had been removed. Could they have benefited without knowing Gale's enchantments all this time? Melissa, perceiving her discomfort, approached and offered her a drink. Moria accepted with gratitude, but kept thinking. She knew that cursed craftsmen normally couldn't use fans, especially a strong enough to affect an entire party without them noticing. But what if Gail had created cursed items that could? This would put him in a class entirely of his own, and anything conventional that the cursed craftsmen were known to achieve. She watched while the others kept arguing. Kush eventually called Norris and Luke to ask. Moria remained quiet, lost in her thoughts. If someone like Gail, capable of such subtle and powerful support magic, had been expelled, was the Wolfpack really worthy of your Shrank status? She started to doubt it. Could they call themselves elite without him? Meanwhile, outside the inn and no longer connected to the pack of wolves, Gail was chasing a bird that had stolen his cursed necklace, screaming to bring it back. A man was checking with Gail to confirm if he really wanted to open a market bank. Gail said yes. He wanted to set one up in the central square of the capital. He was inside the Pumpkin Seed Merchant Association at the time. The man agreed to help, but said the central square was a popular place, and renting space there would cost 4 gold coins a day. Gail went into his pocket, but all he had was 3 silver coins, all his savings. The man then mentioned that there were cheaper places on the way to the square. Gail agreed to take one of these. Gail brought all his stuff and rode in front of his cabin. Space wasn't perfect, but it was enough for him to start. The guild man gave you a beginner's kit. It was high and slightly used, but Gail was grateful and shook the man's hand. He was planning on selling his extra cursed items and some things that seemed cool enough to be used as decoration. He wasn't sure how much to charge for each item, but he figured if he could at least recover the money he spent on materials, it would be worth it. When Gail started riding and touching the items, he started wondering if he was showing them the best way. So the guild man came back and said he forgot to tell Gail something. He slapped a part in Gail's face and pointed out that Gail's display was wrong. He showed Gail how it should be done, organizing everything carefully and facilitating customer navigation. Gail was surprised by the difference and thanked the man again. The man gave you one last piece of advice. Everyone has their own way of doing business, but if the customers don't find what they're selling, nobody's going to buy anything, and Gail's going to end up broken. After that, the man waved and left to return to his post. Gail thought about how kind he was. After being treated so badly by Kush and the others, it really hit him emotionally. He cried. Under the shirt, he took a necklace. He liked it very much, but desperate times meant he had to sell it. He hung it in the tent, ready to sell. It was time to start. It was his first time doing something like this, and he started getting really nervous. He wondered what people in town thought of cursed objects. Would you be willing to buy them? Would they like them? He hit his own cheeks to increase his confidence. So he raised his voice and called people passing by. He announced he had a collection of debuff items, tools for adventurers, available at great prices. A passing man noticed his talismans and said they were rare. Another woman saw the cursed objects and wondered if a debuffant wizard would be more useful than such items. Gail explained that while cursed items are used once and not as powerful as wizard spells, they can be used by anyone and do not require magical power. It made them appeal to a wide variety of adventurers. People started to get interested. A different man was surprised to find a poisoned talisman being sold for only 5 copper coins. That was very cheap. Gail explained that he made them using parts of monsters and ingredients he mixed. So the cost was mostly his own time and effort. There was much more than just poisonous talismans. It also had items that caused status effects, increased statistics, and added other skills. The man decided to try to buy one. So something else caught his eye. He noticed a strange gun and asked about it. Gail said it was a cursed short sword. He slightly lowered his agility, but gave a powerful anti-weapon effect against monsters. It also increased all other statistics by 10 cents. The downside, it was cursed. The man was shocked and dropped his sword. He asked for confirmation, and Gail clarified. Yes, it was cursed. The man laughed nervously, saying that although he appreciated Gail's honesty, he was not sure who would buy a cursed sword. Gail joked that maybe it could be used for decoration. The drawing was nice after all. The man thought about it. It was scary, but he didn't hate how it looked. In fact, He thought it might even work to scare evil spirits from his home. They made a deal, and Gail included up to 3 free dissipator talismans. The man thanked you. Gail started explaining each item more clearly after that. What the curse was, how to remove it, and what the item could do. For example, the cursed necklace increased all statistics by 5%, but it came with a curse. The client still liked how flashy it looked and bought, with talisman syncs included, of course. The cursed boots gave 2.5 more agility, but again they were cursed. A woman bought it for her slave. Gail gave her talismans too. He showed a cursed beast. He raised all the stats by 30%. Shot right, skill, and yes, he was cursed. Someone else bought it to use in a hunting competition. Gail gave him 5 dissipating talismans along with him, and waved him with a smile. Later another man approached and asked about one of the items. Gail told him a story she once heard about a legendary hero whose closest ally was a berserker. That berserker loved cursed equipment, and his favorite armor was one of those cursed objects. Gail knew some people reacted badly to anything cursed, but he believed that if he explained clearly what the curse was, how to cancel it, and all the benefits the item offered, people could see the value in what he was selling. And from then on, things started selling. Gail had included the dissipator talismans with their cursed objects. Soon, more people began to gather in his tent. They were talking excitedly. They heard he was handing out free talismans with groceries. That surprised them, because that kind of thing was super rare. Standing in his tent, Gail kept calling to attract customers. He told everyone that everything was cheap, and it came with complete sets of cursed equipment, plus the free sinks. His plan worked. Eventually, every item he had was sold. The tent was completely cleaned. His bag looked light, much lighter than when he arrived. And he wasn't just some kind of client. All kinds of people had bought it from him. He even remembered a guy commenting that Gail's cursed equipment looked like death metal, very intense and nervous. That guy pointed to a specific item, saying he stood out more. Suddenly Gail heard heavy footsteps. A small group of men walked towards him and asked if this was the place that sold cursed items with free dissipations, and if any remained. Gail had to say everything was already sold out. The 3 men were visibly disappointed. It was clear that the offer of free dissipations caught people's attention. One of them regretted not showing up earlier before his search began. The group looked at Gail again and asked, "What if they brought some stuff? I could." Gail put curses on him and give them some dissipations too. Gail said he'd be back the next day, and before they could say anything else, he ran away quickly. Meanwhile, customers who bought your items were already talking to each other. Some decided to try out their new equipment. A man provoked his friend, who was always afraid of cursed things, not to faint. Despite the nerves, the second man placed the cursed ring. Soon after, he checked the statistics and was stunned. The impulse was real. He increased his stats by 50%. He showed the results to his friend, who was equally shocked. Could a single ring really do that? It almost seemed too powerful for such a small thing. Other close customers were also surprised by what they got. The 2 men who tried the ring were thrilled. One of them said that even if the ring was cursed, who cared? He wouldn't. But the other one had a concern. Having a curse removed by the church was very expensive, like an expensive gold coin. He even wondered aloud if they could sell the free sync talismans they have. Your friend told you to be quiet. If any priest heard that, they'd freak out. Still, they both knew the truth. The church charged a lot for pushing away curses. Whoever made these items clearly knew what they were doing. One of them guessed that every group of adventurers in the area would be chasing the guy who did this. They wondered who Gail really was. Damn craftsmen aren't usually as cheerful or useful. One of them even thought Gail looked familiar, but couldn't find him. While whispering their hunches and rumors, none of them knew the whole truth. Gail once took on the painful effects of 4 cursed items just to be able to support his team. Had gladly done it. He helped his old party grow strong enough to achieve rank status. And after all that, they kicked him out, leaving him with no choice but to sell his creations in a small tent on the side of the road, offering them at bargain prices. From that day on, stories about a mysterious craftsman with cursed equipment began to spread. People whispered about a man who showed up at random, sold incredibly powerful items for cheap money, and then disappeared. Gail, for your part, was feeling good. Even a little money raised his spirit. Things have finally started to get better. But at the same time, away from the market, his old party was in a dangerous forest search. Out of nowhere, a big explosion echoed. A tree was torn in half. Another boom followed, and Kush, one of Gale's former companions, was thrown into another tree. He screamed out of frustration. The team cursed with anger. How did this happen? They were a Shrank party, the best of the best. This shouldn't be happening. A giant monster roared in front of them. He was an ogre, and I wasn't backing down. The group was preparing for a high-level search. One of them, Melissa, was concerned about how they would perform with a new teammate. The search was classified as S, the greatest difficulty. But Kush wasn't worried. He himself chose the new girl, and believed that she was one of the best adventurers in the whole guild. Luke, another member of the team, hoped she could keep up with the team. The rest of the party smiled at her, and she smiled back without saying much. As they passed through the area, Kush noticed a monster nearby. He used it to warm up. They faced the monster, but the battle quickly became intense. Even Kush started feeling the tension. Luke shot arrows from his bow. But your aim was wrong, and one almost hit Melissa instead of the monster. He claimed something was wrong with his control. Melissa wasn't impressed. She called the monster just an ogre. But before she could finish her thinking, the ogre shook a big shovel and hit Luke and her on a tree. Kush asked Norris, his wizard, how long it would take to cast his spell. Norris, under pressure, tried to respond, but the spell he unleashed was just a flame. Kush was furious. Such weak magic would not help them. He insulted Norris without realizing that the ogre was already after him. Suddenly, a spell was activated. A brilliant magic field surrounded Kush and took him out of danger. Moria, your support wizard, saved him. She asked if he was okay, but Kush was too busy yelling at her to start polishing the party. Moria calmly explained that she was doing just that the whole time and was running out of magic energy. She then turned her gun and threw it on the floor. A flash of light spread across the field, and a bright mark appeared under Kush's feet. His stats doubled. He was now twice as powerful. She said he should be able to handle a monster like the ogre now. Encouraged, Kush attacked the monster, believing he had the advantage. But when he hit, the ogre stopped his sword with one hand and didn't seem bothered. He raised Kush in the air and threw him away like he was nothing. As the monster struck again, Kush had no choice but to retreat. As he ran, he cursed Moria, calling her a useless wizard. He doubted the power of his fans and blamed her for the situation. Moria walked away, remembering that he was the one who originally told her not to use too many fans before. He wanted to save them for a later fight with a stronger monster. So she mentioned a special debuff that had been left behind for them. It was something Gale had prepared before he left the party. Kush reacted in anger. He grabbed her by the collar, furious that she considered using Gale's cursed objects. He didn't believe they could help in this situation. But Moria explained that Gale left her notes, passing knowledge about her battle strategy, which they called Wolfpack style. He even included some cursed equipment she could use. Before Moria joined the team, Gale had been the only one to support everyone from the shadows, weakening his enemies with cursed items before the battles began. Kush pushed her and fell to the ground. At that moment, something lit up. Yesterday's strange magic circles were not normal lovers, they were curses. Gale cursed them before he left. Melissa agreed, realizing the same thing. Your strange failures and weakened strength during this struggle all made sense now. Luke admitted he felt something wrong from the beginning. Finally, the group decided that they would back off for today. As they returned, they were all angry with Gale. Kush was especially furious, thinking about how this road was known to be full of class of monsters. But skilled adventurers use this path all the time, and a team like theirs shouldn't have had any problems. They should be stronger than that. Luke tried to calm things down. He said that the curse Gale left behind was clearly affecting his performance. and it was smarter to regroup and come back to the fullest. Norris agreed, calling it a strategic retreat. Melissa also thought it best to back off, especially because the ogre didn't even seem interested in them anymore. The monster got tired of waiting and left, so Kush made the call. The team would be back for now. He said there was no reason to worry about the curse. They'd come back later and settle things properly. Moria was shocked when she realized the party was already retreating. It seemed too soon for such a strong group to give up. After all, they should be a strength party. But Kush pointed out that they were all in shape, and surprisingly, Moria didn't seem too hurt. The others agreed and said she didn't do much during the fight, so they told her to take the rear position when they left. Moria was stunned. She was a support wizard, not a frontline fighter. That kind of paper wasn't for someone like her. It didn't make sense, and she felt like they were pushing the responsibility on her. But Kush sent her away with thanks and told the others to move on. The whole party ran away, leaving Moria behind. The ogre, who was listening in silence the whole time. She stayed with Moria. He looked at her and made an observation about how difficult her situation seemed. Alone and furious, Moria crushed the roll Gail had left, threw in the air, and screamed out of frustration. But as the paper rolled through the air, suddenly lit up with a bright flash, and released a great cloud of smoke. Full of rage, Moria ran away, screaming that she was going to destroy everyone. Meanwhile, the rest of the party walked a long way and finally stopped to rest. They were sick and completely drained. Norris mentioned he lost his favorite item on the way. Everyone felt they were going to die of exhaustion. Kush couldn't believe they'd been beaten so badly by just one ogre. Melissa started blaming Moria. She pointed out the new girl wasn't much help. Normally, your team could handle several ogres without much trouble. Something really weird about today. They were abnormally weak and tired, even though they had run only a short distance. Kush said it was obvious what was happening. Melissa kept talking about Moria, saying she was showing off her body a lot instead of doing her job. The three guys in the group looked at each other quietly, thinking the same thing. How was that relevant? When Melissa turned to them, they quickly looked and murmured that it was nothing. Norris pointed out it wasn't just Moria's fault. Even before using any of their magic, their fight had already lost its spark. Luke agreed. He said Norris took twice the normal time to cast a simple spell. Norris fought back that Luke was no better. If Luke were in his usual form, that ogre would already be a pile of ashes. Kush brought everything back to Gail. He was the only one responsible for this mess. Now they were thinking how they could get back at him. So Moria took the group. Kush made a comment about how long it took and assumed he had lost the ogre. She was breathing a lot, but her eyes were focused on them. Kush noticed something strange. Something was stuck behind her back, and he wasn't sure what it was. Back in town, Gail was joyfully gathering his items. He thought to himself how fun it was to run a tent. Still, he wanted more ordinary people to buy from him. Some came to see, but most didn't buy anything. Most of their sales were for adventurers, especially those seeking their cursed equipment or useful dissipating talismans. While thinking of your next step, a family trader greeted him. Gail said things were going well and thanked him. He thought about moving his tent to a new location, and the merchant had an idea. The merchant thought of Gail's suggestion and realized that Gail was talking about the noble neighborhood, an area only 10 meters away. While ordinary people were mainly concerned with utility, wealthy nobles were more about chic items that seemed impressive. If the nobles saw Gail's equipment as elegant or artistic, he could become popular with them. You may even be asked to draw decorations for castles. That would mean he was more than just a craftsman. He'd be a trendy guy. The merchant also remembered one of Gail's clients from before, a man with red eyes who gave a strange and intense vibration. It made him feel like moving the tent was a smart move. With those thoughts aside, Gail focused on business. He set up his tent again, ready for another busy day. But what he didn't notice was that someone, a girl, watched him discreetly from a distance. Moria finally gets to the guild, but the others are already waiting and are not happy. The party provokes her for being late, with Melissa making a rude comment about her body. Luke points out that she's still just a rookie and hopes to learn the lesson from the last fight. Norris tries to move on and suggests everyone comes back. But Moria is confused. She doesn't understand what you're talking about. Then Kush suddenly realizes something behind her. The ogre they thought she was careful is back, now in real size because the effect of the cursed item has passed. Moria is stunned and insists she has not lost control. She quickly flees, screaming that she cannot handle the monster alone and the rest of them must take responsibility. Even if she should be the rear, she leaves them to deal with it. The ogre starts stepping towards the party, and they're terrified. Melissa, in panic, pushes the guys forward, saying they should deal with it. They freak out and try to distract the ogre by saying something ridiculous. But the ogre is not interested. As a vegetarian, with that, the party runs for their lives. For days it passes. The party is sitting on a table in complete defeat. They look dirty, exhausted, and miserable. Kush asks for water, and Melissa wishes she could take a bath. They were lost in a different forest after fleeing the ogre and had not cleaned up since. People in the room cover their noses. The group stinks. Behind the counter, someone asks Moria if these people are her party. She says yes, but they deserve what they're getting. The party's still blaming Gail. Luke said the service in this place is terrible. The innkeeper knocks a glass of water on his desk, saying they only have one, and even that's not free. Kush is angry and questions his attitude. But she calls them for what they are, parasites who didn't pay for their stay. They fight back, but she reminds them that they only paid until yesterday. If you want to stay longer or eat, you have to pay. Kush confidently says they are a party shrank, but then checks his money bag and finds it empty. Everyone pushes him to pay, but when they see his look, they realize something is wrong. Kush reviewed everything he spent on: beauty products damaged by the ogre, a new dagger, repair costs for the equipment, and even your custom sword that was destroyed. All the funds are gone. The Wolfpack is officially broken. The innkeeper says it's a silver coin per person per night, another silver if you want food. That's 5 people, at least 5 pieces of silver. They sit there quietly, making strange faces. When she asks if they can pay or not, no one answers. Melissa, dying of thirst, faces the water. So, ignoring everyone, she takes a sip. The others are trying to stop her, but it's too late. Meanwhile, at the counter, Moria quietly asks for a drink and something to eat. The 3 guys looked at her, frozen in shock. They ask how she could pay without putting anything in the party funds. Nora says it's not okay. Luke acts like has been betrayed. Moria explains that she used her own personal money. She reminds them that their fund only applies when they complete a job together. But others try to twist their words. Kush said she's being silly and that everything should go to the bottom of the party. Melissa picks her up and says that what Moria is the party, and what the party is also the party. They hold it while they pass through the coin purse. I'm amazed at the money she has. They comment that talented support mages must earn a lot. Moria gnashes her teeth. She's furious. Kush tries to underestimate her, saying that her magical attacks are as weak as mosquito bites. But before he can finish the sentence, Moria's fist hits him in the face with a superior blow. He hits the floor. Melissa takes a chair and screams not to get cocky just because she has a certain kind of body. She shakes the chair in Moria, but only hits her clothes. Moria's already disappeared from that place. 1 minute, she shows up behind Melissa and punches her too. Luke and Norris are panicking, trying to calm her down, but Moria denounces them, calling them aspirants. Luke threatens her. But then a brilliant magic circle appears at Moria's feet. As the two try to attack, she turns to the air. Take them both down. Everyone at the inn is shocked. Moria calmly wipes her forehead and smiles. She apologizes to the innkeeper for the mess, offering to pay for the damage. The innkeeper is impressed and says if anything, she helped clean the place up. Moria then turns to her stunned teammates and announces that she is officially leaving the party with immediate effect. Meanwhile, back in the tent, Gail is negotiating with a noblewoman. She's impressed with her strange and unique items, especially one with a lizard design. Gail thinks to himself that is not a lizard, is actually a basilisk. He praises her taste and explains that it's a cursed oil lamp. A noblewoman visiting Gale's stable suddenly got scared. Her bodyguard quickly took a step forward to protect her. He was furious, thinking Gale was trying to sell cursed items to someone in high society. Gale quickly tried to explain. It wasn't a weapon or something dangerous, just a decorative piece. The guard asked him to explain more. Gale sighed. Earlier, Gale explained to other customers that the lamp had a charming effect. He had set his high prices, hoping for resistance. But surprisingly, many nobles were willing to pay even more without question. Even if his handmade equipment was popular, it was something he himself did. The single-use battle items were not getting much attention. Still, Gale had a decent sales day. It was time to start closing the shop. He remembered how, at first, everyone reacted so negatively to his cursed items. Nobles called them curious or interesting, but they never said they liked their projects. Gale began to wonder if perhaps his taste was too unusual for high society. While holding one of his items, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Someone asked if he was closing. When he turned around, he saw a girl looking at his goods. She wasn't dressed as fancy as other nobles, but there was something about her. Maybe she left a noble house. He noticed a man who looked like a guard watching her from afar. The girl inspected your items closely. She said she liked how different everything was. Gale was surprised. It was the first time anyone praised your projects. She pointed a ring, saying it was beautiful. Gale was shocked. He even blushed, glad someone appreciated his work. He didn't know exactly what kind of noble she was. But since she was clearly dressed, he didn't think I should treat her so formally. Since he was about to close, he decided to make a good deal. The girl then mentioned something strange. She said her scholarship was in the cast, and then she corrected herself, pretending to be home. She winked at him, saying he didn't have much money on her. Gale laughed, realizing he probably meant the castle. He said the money she had would be fine. After all, she was the first person to praise her work. But he told her to keep secret from her usual clients. She laughed and gave him something in return. When Gale opened his hand, he was stunned. It was a big gold coin. He couldn't believe she carried that much money. Before he could say anything, she was already smiling and leaving. He thought she was pretty, but then he shook. Someone was watching him from the shadows with a dark expression. He realized he'd forgotten something important. He didn't explain the curse of the item or give you a talisman to cancel. He panicked a little bit. Where'd she go? She was already gone. Fortunately, the item she bought was just a curse memorial ring, nothing too dangerous. The curse wasn't so bad. He increased his defense and made the user resistant to instant death attacks. The only disadvantage was that once you put it, you couldn't take it off unless the curse was removed. But she was clearly rich, so she could go to church to break the curse. When he saw her again, he promised himself that he would apologize and give her a proper charm. So he thought about what she almost said. She was about to say she lived in a castle. Meanwhile, the girl was grabbed and dragged into an alley by several hands. She fought, screaming it to let her go and asking why they were grabbing her. A woman showed up and asked the soldiers if they had caught her. They waved and the woman signaled them to move. The girl kept fighting and screaming no. Later, inside the royal castle, the soldiers fell, exhausted from pursuing her. The woman scolded the girl, asking her to stop causing so much trouble. The young lady remembered who she was, Princess Cara, but the princess didn't seem happy. In Gale's tent, he was walking when someone hit him on the back. A stranger said he was looking for a young man with black hair and a blue jacket that has a tent nearby. Someone who looked exactly like Gale. The man asked to see your face. But when Gale turned around, he got confused and asked if he looked so young. The man apologized and left. Once he turned the corner, he slipped in a hidden alley. Gale was upset. The military in the capital were looking for him. This can't be good. He decided it was time to pack and get out of town quickly. Some kids who saw him disappear in the alley were surprised and asked what kind of magic trick he did. He asked them to be quiet. A woman is scolding Princess Cara for wearing the ring she bought in town. She says it's blasphemous, something that goes against the church. But the princess doesn't see the problem. She thinks the nobles should mix more with the people in town and that includes buying their stuff. The woman looks around Cara's room. It's full of strange items from the city. She clearly doesn't share Cara's love for that. Cara points that out and mentions that the woman, Vivian, still has a lot to learn. Vivian ignores the comment and recalls that she was supposed to meet a foreign envoy that morning. So she needs to hurry up and get ready. But before Vivian finishes talking, she notices something. Cara's putting the weird ring on her finger. Vivian panics. She knows exactly what kind of ring it is and can't believe the princess would wear it to an important political meeting. Cara said she wouldn't use it. Just try it. Elsewhere, Gail is at Guild Adventurers, sitting at the table and enjoying a hot meal. He's proud of how well things are going. At first, he was nervous about working alone, but it's getting better than expected. Maybe he really has a gift for that kind of business. Still, he knows that selling repaired garbage won't make him rich, so he thinks he should do some real missions and maybe go to a different city soon. As he goes down to leave the guild, he sees his old party Kush, Melissa, Luke and Norris standing at the front counter. Gail quickly hides. He doesn't want anyone to see him. On the counter, the group is asking the receptionist for money. They want an investment, saying they're a Shrank party and deserve at least 10 or 20 gold coins. But the receptionist is not impressed. She remembers they haven't completed a single mission since they became Shrank, and it's hard to justify funding people who didn't get anything. Kush tries to argue that they still have time, but when asked if they met with a client yet, they admit they don't. The receptionist said a client had already filed a complaint. Angry that elite team, Shrank, ignored them. The group whispers about having trouble with a monster. The receptionist brings the ogre. Of course, he was a class enemy. But they're a class party. Your excuse. It was a changed version. She corrects them. He was just a normal ogre. She also knows they let them follow them into town, causing more trouble. And it wasn't even their only mistake. She asks if they think the guild is not paying attention. Kush tries to make a sarcastic comment, but the receptionist won't back down. She talks about Moria, who left the party a few days after joining. The Silver Wolf Inn even sent a complaint and an account to the guild because of his behavior. The guild had to cover it, so now the group owes them money. Gail, watching from afar, thinks to himself that the group is in serious trouble. They look exhausted and down. Suddenly, the receptionist slammed her hand on the counter. She's had enough. She challenges them to say the word investment once again. Kush grinds his teeth and says it's all Gail's fault. That shocks Gail. The group accuses him of cursing them. Because of your supposed curse equipment, your stats are ruined and even magic fans aren't helping. But Gail is confused. He thought had already removed curses from all of them. Luke's guilty. He lived for being useless and Norris agrees, but the receptionist cuts them off. She says that Moria is ranked in the top 5 mages of support across the capital. She only left her last party because of some problems, and the guild thought the Silver Wolf group would be a good fit. Clearly, they weren't. The team is stunned. They didn't know Moria was so well ranked. Even Gail is surprised. He never thought she was so strong, and now she's gone from the group. The receptionist then defends Gail. She says it's ridiculous to blame him. The curse is rare and your talent is incredible. Even one of your curse removal talismans is worth a lot of money. Gail listened to this, blush. He remembers doing some of these for the guild as a side job. The receptionist makes one thing very clear. They need to pay off their debts before they ask someone for help. Kush tries to act like it's no big deal, saying they'll pay back quickly. He sends the others away. Melissa asks what they'll do to Gail. But Norris reminds them that they need to find a mission that they can really complete. Luke agrees. No more missions Shrank until the curses are gone. Kush says shut up while you leave. Other people in the guild whisper to each other, wondering if that group is really Shrank. They don't look anything like they expected. Gail wonders what they mean about curses. He was sure he removed them all. Is there anything still affecting them? He doesn't know, but had rather leave before they see him and take his anger out on him. He leaves, just like a group of soldiers pass him. They're running somewhere in panic. You wonder what the emergency is. The other one says there's a fight between Princess Cara and Vivian. When they argue, it gets violent fast. It takes the whole army to calm them down. Gail can't believe that the army of the capital is called for such things. He comes by a merchant's shop and thinks about stopping by. He opens the door and hears the bell ring above him. In the castle, the guards are nervous trying to calm Vivian down. They remind her that she is in the royal palace and needs to breathe. But Vivian's furious. She screams that the ring Princess Cara is wearing is cursed. Everyone sighs. Vivian remembers telling Cara not to use it. But Cara ignored her, saying she just wanted to try it for a moment. Once the ring slipped on his finger, he refused to leave. Even with both pulling, he got stuck. An elderly counselor shows up and tells the princess to remove the ring immediately. Cara says she can't. Vivian said there's only one option left. They'll have to cut off her finger to remove it. With the sword in her hand, she moves towards the princess, saying there is no time before the diplomatic meeting. The guards are panicking. Everyone runs to protect the princess. The next day, Princess Cara received the envoys and thanked them for their patience. When they saw her, they bowed respectfully and praised her appearance. She smiled and thanked me back. One of them noticed the ring on his finger and asked. She laughed and made up a story, saying she'd cut herself. Earlier that morning, she and the others were still fighting to get him out when the arrival of the envoys was announced. Trying to be a good hostess, Cara mentioned how tired they must be of traveling and suggested they start with tea. But the envoys politely refused, saying they had brought something better. Snacks and tea straight from the Empire. They offered him a chance to try them, clearly excited to show what they had brought. They made gestures toward a very large box they brought in. Cara was surprised at the size and joked about how many snacks it should contain. But when the box was opened, its expression changed completely. There was no food inside. It was a group of armed bandits, hiding with guns ready. One of the fake envoys revealed his true plan. The bandits had poison on their blades that would kill instantly and painlessly. The whole room went into chaos while the royal guards were screaming to protect the princess. Vivian, as always, reacted quickly and ordered the soldiers to attack. But it was too late. The killers moved out. They targeted Cara, ready to take her down. But your weapons didn't land. Instead, the spears and blades jumped out of something invisible. Everyone was stunned. The killers tried again. Still, nothing worked. It was like a wall was protecting her. The princess herself did not understand what was happening at first. Then she suddenly realized something. Could it have been him? She remembered Gail, the man who sold the ring. She had been the first person to praise her projects. Could this ring have created a barrier? Vivian had the guards capture the fake voice, so she ran to the princess and checked if she was hurt. Cara said she was fine. Vivian was confused about why someone would pretend to be from the Empire. But for now, she said they needed to take the princess somewhere safe until things calmed down. Later, at a place called Star Chamber, two men were examining the ring. They asked Bishop and Arizal, the appraiser, what they thought. Was it a dangerous curse? The bishop replied that it was not dangerous to remove, but it was incredibly complex. It was clearly done by someone with deep knowledge of the magic of the curse. The curse in the ring was high. It increased the effect the user would receive, but also came with huge side effects. To fix this, the crafter had several counter-cursive layers on top, canceling the bad parts out. The bishop kept explaining, but Cara couldn't understand what he was saying. It was very technical. He said there was more to explain, but he gave the rest to Arizal. Arizal, looking surprised, said the ring gave the user triple the defense and protection against being killed instantly. Vivian was shocked to hear that. Arizal explained that this level of power was not just a sacred relic. It was either a sacred relic or something even bigger. Arizal seemed very excited for someone looking at a cursed object. He even said he never thought he'd see anything so amazing as a teenager. As soon as he got carried away and held the princess' hand long, a sharp fist fell on his head. Vivian, angry, warned him to behave. Vivian then remembered something. There was another church relic called the Angel Shield, which had a similar effect. Arizal confirmed that she also offered protection against instant death. But the bishop said that no other known item had the same effect and seemed so common. He said there was one more artifact that came close. The most valuable treasure in the Empire, the Heart of the Devil. This item had a long list of powerful abilities, instant death resistance, stat impulses, faster spells, and more. But it came at a price. This would slowly drain the user's life. If it wasn't removed in time, it'd kill them. That was the price of such immense power. Vivian nodded. She said that in their world, great power always had a cost. That's how magic works. But this ring didn't seem to have great disadvantages. That made it even more incredible. Maybe even more valuable than a relic. Cara then turned to Vivian and raised Gail again. Vivian said she remembered what he looked like. She asked if Cara wanted her to find him and deal with him, possibly wanting to fight him or punish him. But Cara said no. She didn't want revenge. She wanted to see you to thank you. Cursed or not, the ring saved your life. Anyway, she wanted to meet him again. Gail was preparing to leave the capital. He wore a cape that had a side pocket to carry his equipment, and he really liked what he felt. He also wore wrist sleeves made with wire lining for extra storage and boots designed to carry items while protecting his feet. He had all the basic equipment ready, including a handmade dagger. The rest of what he needed, he planned on finding it along the way. With everything ready, he finally decided it was time to leave. When looking at the city, the morning air was fresh and fresh. The streets were slowly coming to life as people began their daily routines. Gail felt a strange feeling. He was really leaving the capital, and somehow it made him stop. While walking near a dark alley, he looked inside out of curiosity, and then stopped, surprised by what he saw. It was his old adventure party. They were together, clearly cold and miserable. One of them, Melissa, got angry when someone touched her. Norris responded rudely, as usual. Seeing this, Gail tried to tell himself that these people no longer mattered to him. He shook his head and left. The city was getting busy. Gail went through the market where he heard people talking. One person said more help was needed somewhere. Another replied that the palace guards were already watching the gates, so there was nothing to worry about. Then he heard horses galloping. Turning to look, he saw the Royal Night Corps and even soldiers from the capital. That was unusual. What were they doing here? Soon he noticed posters being placed. The sign asked if anyone had seen a man who seemed to be in his teens, sloppy, with black hair, selling cheap street decorations. The message said if anyone saw him, they should contact the castle or the nearest knight or soldier. Gail heard it while the knights were talking. A knight asked if the square had been searched. The other replied that the capital army was already fully covering. They had check-ins, guilds, everywhere. Gail kept calm and acted like he didn't know anything, even if the description matched him almost perfectly. But he told himself it couldn't be him. After all, your items weren't so cheesy. One of the knights was frustrated, saying they didn't have enough information. Then he looked at Gail. He said there were a lot of sloppy guys out there, and Gail seemed to be the right age. He examined Gail's equipment and said it sounded tacky, but added that Gail didn't look like the guy they were looking for. Gail was upset about the insult, but he didn't say much. The knight was convinced that the real suspect wouldn't be dressed so well. He said the man they were looking for was selling scary things, and it looked dirtier. Gail agreed to avoid trouble, and the knight let him go. After that, Gail leaned against a wall and sighed. He felt like an idiot for being so emotional about the city. He told himself it was time to move on. At the city gate, many stagecoaches were lined up, ready to take people to different places. Gail considered your options. He needed to go somewhere with job opportunities. Emirates was a big mall, good for business. Gracious Fort was a military base. Grandstadt was an old town, full of history. Then a coachman shouted that there were only 2 places left on a ride, and they were going with a discount. When Gail heard the word sale, his interest lit up. He asked where he was going. The coachman said he was going to Farmage, an agricultural center. Gail thought of fresh food, and his mouth practically watered the idea. He raised his hand to claim a seat. But someone raised their hand too, and said they'd like one too. Gail turned around and was surprised. The person looked familiar. She took off her cape, and yes, she did Moria. Glarus, a girl from the Kush party. It's only been a few days since you two met. Gail recognized her and realized she stood out too much. She was attractive and had a strong presence. Moria smiled in a way that made him nervous. He was going to say something, but her look made him rethink it. He felt a little guilty about what he was thinking and blamed it on being a guy. Inside the bus, they both sat down. Gail tried to be friendly and said they should get along on the trip. Earlier, Moria had punched him in the face, and now her cheek still hurts. Moria responded coldly, but clearly she wasn't angry anymore. When the coach left the capital, Gail yawned. He was very tired. Moria pushed him and said he was too close. He apologized and explained that there wasn't much room. He looked around the coach. There were metal goods and imports packed for transport. A hired mercenary was guarding the cargo. Some other travelers were also on board, and, of course, sitting next to him was an intense woman, Moria, who had already left her party. This happened fast. Gail sighed to himself. How could he sleep like that? He remembered that even if they didn't start well, it was better to keep things calm for now. Moria said she wasn't mad. Gail thought maybe it wasn't. After all, she joining the party had nothing to do with why she kicked him out. Kush was probably just interested in her, and the others were already planning to get rid of him for a while. She probably came at the right time to make it happen. He asked why she left the group, called Wolfpack. She turned to him and, instead of answering directly, asked why he had not left the party before. Then she laughed and explained what had happened. Apparently, not even a big monster caused trouble, just an ogre. And Kush couldn't even handle it. According to her, Kush was a useless leader, and the others in the group were not much better. They were beginners, and their magic spells and bow and arrow were weak. She couldn't understand why Gail joined such a terrible team. He asked if she was sure it was Kush's fault. She answered like there was no doubt. And now the guild had noticed how bad he was too. That's why she was also leaving the capital, so things would calm down. She told him that the other party members started blaming him for all his bad luck. But honestly, to her, he seemed the only one in the group who knew what he was doing. Gail smiled at it, so she quickly apologized, realizing that he probably had mixed feelings since he met those people. Gail said everything was fine and apologized that her time with them turned out to be a mess. She said it wasn't his fault. She called him more Gail, but he said to call him Gail. After that, there was a moment of silence between them. Gail looked at her. She wasn't carrying much. Maybe she left the group before she jumped in the trailer. Wanting to help, he took a loaf of bread out of the bag. He cut off some ingredients and made a quick sandwich. He joked that she was officially part of the Wolfpack Victims Club. She said she wasn't sure how much of a victim he was. But when she saw the sandwich, her eyes shone and she accepted. He told her not to worry about the little things, so he offered the other passengers sandwiches too. Moria took a big bite and said it was great. She was surprised how quickly he arrived. Gail laughed and said it was all about having good ingredients. He even drank wine with him. She joked that he wanted to get her drunk, but she noticed something. It wasn't just any wine. It was Romaine wine, a rare and expensive type. She asked if he was okay with her drinking. He said yes. His market had been a great success, so he could afford it. Moria mentioned something Shed heard. There's been a major commotion in the market recently about someone selling an artifact item from a tent. Of course, she didn't know it was Gail's tent. Gail was surprised. An artifact. In a regular tent. What kind of fool would sell something so rare and powerful? Moria said even the princess was looking. It made him stop. He remembered a certain moment. The castle, the princess, when someone came after him. But he quickly shook, thinking it couldn't be connected. She asked if he had the artifact, but he cleaned it up, saying it didn't look like the kind of person who would be carrying one. She agreed. He didn't look it. He joked that she might have lied to him to make him feel good. She said that people who create artifacts usually live in temples or sacred mountains. He agreed, like old hermits hiding in the mountains. Then all of a sudden, Gail made a funny face, wrinkling it like an old man. Moria turned to him and laughed so much that she echoed through the whole carriage. They clapped and she said she was starting to like him. Gail said he didn't hate her either. They agreed that if they weren't trapped, in their current roles, He was a curse craftsman, and she was a support wizard. They would be a good first-line team. Still, maybe someday, if they get the chance. But before he could finish that thought, something hit the carriage. Everything went black for a moment. He couldn't see anything. The screams came from outside. It was an orc attack. Because the caravan had been shaken so hard, he ended up leaning on Moria's chest. He commented strangely on how soft it was. Moria hit him and remembered it wasn't time for jokes. Outside, things were getting worse. The mercenary guard had been eliminated. One of the men ran into the carriage, screaming for help. The passengers were terrified. The orcs saw her wagon and started running towards her. Moria realized this was bad. The orcs were coming, and no one in the carriage was trained to fight except maybe her and Gail. She asked Gail if he had a gun. He was confused for a second, but she explained that there was no choice. They had to fight. She had a magic stick and a little dagger. Gail said he had some unique use talismans that could delay enemies in a short sword. Not the most powerful tools, but better than nothing. Moria admitted it wasn't good, but they had to try. She said she hated sitting around waiting to die. Although she was more used to supporting magic and only fought in emergencies, she said he could trust her. Gail said he'd take the front line and she should support him. She agreed and apologized. He told her not to apologize. He would never let a girl fight alone if he could avoid it. Then he shouted that it was time to show these orcs what two adventurous excessive hierarchies could actually do. The orcs didn't seem worried about them. Gail thought they didn't think he or Moria were a threat. That's why he had to strike first to at least take one down. Moria threw some little rocks on the floor. Gail looked at her and shook her staff. Suddenly a barrier appeared. She said she should hold on for a while and strengthen him with aficionados as soon as possible. He waved, thinking she knew how to plan things. He squeezed the dagger hard. Moria noticed the gun and shook. There was something strange about him, some kind of dark energy around him. It looked like it was covered in black magic. At the beginning of the battle, Moria explained her plan. It was simple, but I needed a perfect moment. Magic doesn't work immediately, so she'd have to activate it at the right time. Once it began, she believed Gail would be strong enough to seriously hurt at least one of the orcs. After that, it would be up to him. He would have to use the magic of the curse to arrest them, while defeating as many as he could. Gail agreed. If they could take it long enough, there was a chance a patrol nearby would notice that something was wrong and come to help. Until then, they'd have to trust their luck. Although she had said all this with confidence, Moria still had doubts. That weird gun he had, it gave him the creeps. Gail said it was just a dagger used to weaken enemies, but she didn't believe he called something so normal. Before she could question him further, he told her to support him and move on. She tried to stop him, but he was gone, so Moria knelt on the floor and started drawing a symbol with her fingers. She cast a quick spell, saying it wouldn't last long, but the effect would be powerful as long as it was active. Gail reacted immediately. He pulled something in shape and threw it right into the orcs. The range was great. It fell right where he wanted it. The scroll attached to the item unfolded in the air. Without wasting time, Gail ran to the orcs. The orcs noticed him, but his curses activated just in time. Black magic wrapped around them, confusing and disorienting them. Their armor shook, and they grunted, not knowing what was going on. Moria was stunned. The sight of it made his legs tremble. What kind of curse was that? Whatever item he played, it was clearly shooting only the monsters that meant wrong. But it was so powerful that Moria felt that even she could be involved if she lost focus. Gail advanced, saying everyone would fall together. Moria called after him. He was going too fast. Your spell wasn't even over yet. One of the orcs roared, but before I could attack, Gail had already reached. 1 minute, he cut his neck and beheaded him. So he was out again, attacking others with the same speed and strength. He screamed out of excitement, thinking it was all because of his fans. But Moria knew the truth. This wasn't her fault. What she saw went far beyond what her support magic could achieve. The dark aura around the battlefield wasn't just dulling the enemy's strength. I was terrorizing them, weakening their armor, and probably even paralyzing them. She had never seen a curse do all this. And that dagger he was wearing, just looking at her, she could say it had special effects that were always active, like making his armor disappear and hiding his true strength. She didn't believe he called it a normal blade. It had to be a legendary weapon. She held her head in disbelief. This whole thing was completely insane. Meanwhile, Gail was having a great time. Your body was glowing from all the magical improvements. Moria's support magic has increased all her skills. Their strength, speed and reaction time were far above normal. He was surprised and thanked her for it. But Moria tried to explain that although technically it helped a little, that's not what she did. Gail laughed, saying that he finally felt strong enough to take down these monsters. Moria looked at him and realized something terrible. The statistics were dropping fast. The spell she used was missing a key part, magic energy. She forgot to carry it properly. The fans were disappearing. She said she'd fix it and it was no big deal. Gail, still full of energy, said that together they were both unbeatable. Moria was confused. Why was he so excited? Without waiting, Gail jumped high in the air and cut another orc, only one left now, standing in front of him. But when that roared, more orcs appeared behind him. Gail didn't hesitate. He threw more cursed items at them. A big explosion followed. Magic was very powerful. Each orc nearby had his head separated from his body. He applauded, thinking it was all thanks to Moria's support magic. The orcs were frozen instead of their curse of slow effect. But Moria didn't like it. That spell shouldn't have delayed them so much. By reducing speed by 90%. That was unheard of. She tried to get his attention and explain that he had misunderstood. But before she could say anything, she saw him hiding behind another orc. With a quick move, he stabbed the back of the head with his dagger. And so another deafening explosion shook the battlefield. The last orc fell to the ground. Moria looked at him in disbelief. Had he defeated in a coup? This kind of instant death was extremely rare, almost impossible without a powerful artifact. She couldn't understand. How could Gail, of all people, do something like this by hand? Nothing else made sense. Gail turned to look at her with a big smile on her face. He was clearly moved by their victory. Before she could talk, he grabbed her hands and tried to turn her around like they were dancing. He was still full of excitement and couldn't stop praising his support magic, thinking it had made all the difference. Moria gave him a heartless thank you, a little overwhelmed by how exaggerated he was acting. The other passengers who were hiding and watching began to spy. Gail waved to them joyfully, and soon they all ran to him, clearly grateful and amazed by what they had seen. Later that night, around the fire, Gail admitted something surprising. It was the first time he fought monsters. During the battle, he was terrified. Moria was surprised. He was part of Kush's party, wasn't he? Gail confirmed that it was one of the founding members. But he explained he wasn't much of a fighter, just someone who used curse magic. Moria was quiet for a moment. So she said Kush must have been an idiot to let someone like Gail go. Gail blushed and stuttered, not sure if she really meant it. He admitted that he honestly didn't blame Kush for dropping it. Maybe it was the right decision. Moria turned her eyes. She couldn't believe how little self-confidence he had. She changed the subject to the coffee he had made. A mixture of dandelion with very good taste. She praised how skillful he was in so many different things. Gail tried to slow down, but she insisted that what he had wasn't just a few tricks. It was more like being almighty. Gail seemed upset and told her not to overdo it. He didn't see himself as something special, especially in battle. Moria sighed of frustration. They were walking in circles. There was something unusual about him. He definitely stood out, and yet he acted like he didn't. She said she was going to sleep and thanked me for the coffee. He said good night. She went to her tent, leaving the rest of the group sitting around the fire. Gail stayed up a little longer, thinking about what he said. Omnipotence, huh? That was a heavy word. You never thought of yourself as someone with that kind of power. He really believed that the previous victory had only happened because Moria supported him very well, but still, something inside him moved. He remembered to be part of an alliance, a party, and how exciting it was. Fighting monsters, though scary, was fun. He laughed silently at himself. Moria was very kind to him. The next morning, the caravan kept moving along the road. The driver said his fate would be near. Moria, now awake, poked Gail, who was still half asleep. He asked if they were there, and she confirmed it. They looked forward. They had arrived. They walked towards their next stop, Farmage, ready for what came next. Gail and Moria arrived at a place called Farmage. It was a typical area of the countryside, full of open fields, animals and farms everywhere. Gail mentioned they were an hour from the border. They left the wagon because it was clear that this place was all about agriculture. It was just fields and pastures as far as the eye could see. Gail had a plan. He was going to the Guild of Local Adventurers, negotiate the parts he had taken from orcs to earn some money, and then start taking missions. Moria decided to go with him to the guild because she wanted to find a party to attend. Gail, however, said he wanted to work alone for now. Later, at Farmage Adventurers Guild, Gail began checking the search board. Moria was surprised by what she was considering. It seemed very difficult to do alone. Gail was confident. Still, he ended up asking Moria if she'd help. The search involved hunting for undead creatures, and it was classified as which meant it was very difficult. But Moria remembered that they were both supportive adventurers, not frontline fighters. She didn't think it would be as easy as her last mission with the orcs. Gail smiled, like he already had something in mind. Then a black elf suddenly appeared and greeted them. None of them had noticed before. She was curious about Gail because she hadn't seen him before. He said he was young, having just arrived from the capital, hoping to try his luck in this region. The elf explained that Farmage was mainly an agricultural and commercial city, and there were not many adventurers around, which made things difficult for locals. She even grabbed Gail's hands and thanked him for showing up. Gail's heart skipped a beat. She was pretty, and he definitely noticed. Meanwhile, Moria stood behind him, not looking very happy. Cuffed caught the leprechaun's attention. The leprechaun asked if she was his friend. Moria said no, they were traveling in the same direction. She introduced herself as a support wizard, also from the capital, and said she would be happy to help as she could. The eyes of the dark elf shone. Supporting magnets were in high demand here, so she was excited. Then she looked at Gail, realizing that he did not use heavy equipment. She guessed he might be a thief. Gail corrected her, saying he was a curse craftsman, someone who uses magic with curses. He explained that while support was his main focus, he could take care of himself in a fight as well. The leprechaun was a little surprised. Cursed craftsmen were rare in this area, and she wasn't sure if there was any proper mission for someone like him. Gail blushed with his reaction, while Moria seemed even more angry. Gail said he was planning to do some missions to get used to the area. But the elf was shocked to see that what he chose was a lich hunt, a job that was untouched for a while. She called it a closed case because no one had taken it. There were no clergy strong enough to deal with it. And without them, the undead were taking over. Families could not even visit the graves of their loved ones. It was a bad situation. She was worried. If Gail were just a craftsman of the curse, this mission could be a death trap. Moria told her to be gentler with her words, but Gail said everything was fine. He was used to it. Moria wanted to discuss more, but Gail made sure he was okay. The leprechaun warned him again. No one had completed this mission yet, and if he had problems, no one would come to save him. Still, Gail said it'd go ahead. He asked for a map of the area. The elf offered holy water and magical items too, but he just wanted the map. She confirmed that the search was his and told him how to prove that he completed it, bringing back lich calls. Gail already knew that. He had experience using them before, which surprised the elf. She thought it was funny and asked him to be careful. When she leaned over and told him how much the city needed adventurers, Gail began to blush again, until Moria stepped on his foot with strength. She was clearly angry. The elf laughed, saying they both got along very well. So she added one last thing. She got them at the farm. The woman in charge of the guild of the adventurers in this agricultural town presented herself as Gimli. She greeted Gail and Moria politely, bowing down and saying she was eager to work with them. Gail waved back, saying the same thing, and then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he sucked. It was full of remains of his previous mission, parts taken from orcs. Gimli was impressed by what he had collected. He said they'd start the new mission tomorrow. Gimli made a comment about how casual he was acting, like moving from city to city and having hard jobs was nothing to him. Gail thanked him, but made it clear he wasn't praising him. Once they were outside, Moria talked about how he was staring at Gimli. She provoked him for getting excited just because someone showed him a little attention. He smiled and pretended not to know what she meant. Moria told him to forget. But it seemed she was deciding to join him on this journey. Gail said you already planned it, right? She didn't respond, and he joked about how not to say anything confirmed it. Moria freaked out she wasn't worried about him. She said she was there to be his backup, like a safety net if things went wrong. Gail looked at her surprise. When she blushed and asked what he was looking at, he said having her around made him feel much better. She blushed even more, wondering how he could say something that serious. Gail admitted that this was his first search on his own, and he was nervous. Moria said people who are going to hunt down the undead should be nervous. But instead of acting scared, he seemed excited, because to him, undead monsters were like trunks of walking treasures full of ingredients. He couldn't wait to get them. That night, the dark elf of the guild was thinking to herself. She was surprised. Gail didn't seem like an ordinary craftsman. There was definitely something different about him. The next day, when Gail finally woke up, he said he slept very well. Moria corrected it. It was more like sleeping too much since it was noon. Gail mentioned that since they arrived, he felt the difference in the air. As Gimli said, this place was about agriculture and trade. Seeing people armed as adventurers was rare, so no wonder the locals found them interesting. Moria told him not to let it affect him. Later, they arrived at the entrance of the crypt where their search would begin. Gail tried to be happy, hoping the search would be quick. Moria was busy checking all her equipment, her silver knife, and to living incense and holy water. Gail called her worried, but she said she was just being prepared. He said everything would be fine, since he was an expert in fighting the undead. It just made Moria worry more. She warned him that if things got bad, they should run. He agreed. He understood that being in the guard position was difficult for her. Moria insisted that you both run away if it came to that. So Gail noticed a door nearby. It opened for a big cemetery. He was impressed by the view, but Moria remembered that they were not there to see. She thought the place was horrible. Gail guessed the undead did all the damage. He started throwing skeletons, and Moria questioned what he was doing. He pointed out that the skeletons had footprints left, like clues. Moria remembered that this cemetery was built upon an ancient dungeon. It must have been old, judging by the size. She asked if what they were doing counted as disrespecting the dead. Gail didn't think so. How else should they explore deeper into the area? Moria tried to show respect by pressing her hands together in prayer. Gail provoked her for being so serious. She said that compared to him, anyone would seem respectful. He pointed out that the skull she was praying about was actually a living creature. The only reason not to move now was because the sun was out. At night, he'd probably get up again. To prove it, he held the skull in her face. She looked closely. Then, suddenly, he broke it and turned around. He asked about her respect for the dead. She replied that the undead were not really the dead. They were just monsters. She hated all that. Gail thought he could have waited outside if he felt that way. He said the cemetery hasn't turned into a dungeon yet. The upper floors would only have weak monsters. That didn't make Moria feel better. Gail said he was going to the dungeon alone. He wanted better quality materials. He told her there was no need for her to waste her supplies, like holy water, gave her a flashlight, waved goodbye, and left, excited to find what he needed. Moria was there alone, angry. She thought to herself, why members of her guild, the Wolfpack, always so selfish? He had just left her there. She looked around, realizing how dark it got. Then she heard a sound, and even afraid, she forced herself to continue. Eventually, she picked up Gail again at the cemetery. She said she wanted out. Suddenly, a strange noise echoed in the dark. Moria screamed, and Gail wavered from the sound. She felt something going through her and panicked, saying it wasn't just her imagination. Tears began to form in her eyes as she grabbed Gail, clinging to him out of fear. He blushed slightly from the sudden proximity. Then out of nowhere, a big explosion exploded nearby. Moria hugged him even more, shaking and screaming from the shock. While she was clinging to him, Gail tried to stay calm and sought the source of the explosion. He couldn't help but notice that her chest was pressing on him. Just for a moment it distracted him, but he shook quickly and concentrated. So he saw the cause of the sound. It was just a flying bat. Moria, pretending she knew all along, pushed him lightly. She admitted she only acted that way to get back at him for provoking her before. She tried to laugh, saying that undead were just piles of bones. But when she turned around, she heard the same scary sound again. This time, she came face to face with a real skeleton. Frozen with fear, she screamed and jumped into Gail's arms, completely panicked. Gail was holding her while screaming that the skeletons had arrived. He winked at the noise. She was screaming right into his ear and tried to calm her down. But she was panicking, tears falling on her face, saying she couldn't calm down. At least you begged her not to scream, right next to his ear. When Moria opened her eyes again, another skeleton appeared right in front of her, with her mouth open. That drove her to the edge. In an explosion of fear and despair, she shook her arms and broke the skeleton with amazing force. Screaming to stay away, Gail watched, stunned by her sudden strength. Moria stood up, still trembling, grabbed the flashlight, and shot straight into the undead. The fire caught fire, and the skeletons began to burn. As the flames spread, more skeletons approached. She screamed again, then pushed Gail towards them, making him stumble into the burning mess along with the skeletons. A little later, after the chaos resolved, Gail asked if she had calmed down. Moria, still a little shaken, apologized for the explosion. He asked why she appeared if she was so afraid of the undead. She didn't look and admit she was worried about him. These hunts were too dangerous to do alone. Gail reminded her again that he was a cursed craftsman. His abilities were built specifically to deal with undead enemies. Still, he appreciated her concern and thanked her for coming. He reached out to help her recover. Since they were now inside the crypt, it would be too dangerous for her to come back alone. He asked if she could hold on a little longer. Moria said she'd try. He said if she got too scared, she could close her eyes. She said if she did, she could get lost. Gail said everything was fine. She could hold his hand, and they would move slowly. They both blushed a little while taking each other's hands. Gail realized that although he was joking about that part, they were holding hands. Just before Gail and Moria left the capital, a group appeared in the forge looking for the blacksmith. It was the Wolfpack party. They asked if he was running the forge there, because they wanted to sell some stuff, but the blacksmith wasn't interested. He told them directly that he didn't serve rude, noisy guys like them. Later, they were back in some cold, hungry alley with their blinking armor and their stomachs growling. Another rider spent it on the streets, trying to figure out how to make money. Look, one of the members announced that he took some missions from the guild. But they were nothing special. A job was the post, take ogres down the road. Another was the post C, defeating a horde of skeleton knights near the old church. There was also a patent search and beat up some elf soldiers, and a done post, hunt some orcs in nature. When he read it out loud, the others looked at him like he was joking. They were a party rank, after all, one of the highest levels among adventurers. Why were they getting work so low? They wondered if Luke was trying to insult them. Norris, the calm one, told everyone to calm down. They were barely holding on. They had no strength or supplies to take on high-level missions. He reminded them of a saying. Even a lion uses all his strength to catch a rabbit. They needed to get what they could. Kush complained about how cheap the missions were, but admitted that the ogre paid over 60 gold coins. Still, everyone remembered what happened the last time they fought an ogre. None of them wanted to go through that again, even if they claimed they weren't afraid. Melissa suggested they try to find the knight. The elf and orc missions paid very little to be worth the effort. Norris pointed out that the search mentioned a horde of skeletons. Maybe the orcs were a better option. Kush hit him, reminding him it was just a crank mission. Melissa argued that skeletons were easy for them. Then she turned to Luke and asked why he even brought these jobs to them. He said he didn't expect things to get so bad that they'd get hungry on the street. Norris tried to keep up. He said they'd have to do what they could. Luke agreed. Skeletons weren't exactly terrifying undead. The only concern was how long their magic would last. He asked if Melissa and Kush would be okay since they were the front lines of the team. Norris pointed them both out, saying they'd be the first ones to get hit if things went wrong. Luke agreed. They had to take care of themselves. Later that day they reached the ancient church grounds, just outside the capital. Luke scouted off the walls and reported what he saw. About 20 skeletons hidden in the shadows just beyond the gates. Kush laughed. 20. That was nothing. Melissa agreed and suggested that she and Kush take charge first. Kush raised his sword confidently, saying that's what the paladins were made for. He raised the gun. He pointed to the sky and sang a holy spell. A flash of light burst, and the skeletons began to move. Melissa ran ahead and erased some. She gave the signal. Norris began to cast magic, while Luke was jumping over the skeletons, hitting them from above. They managed to take down some in that first wave. Kush said this was his usual strategy. Your sacred skills lead the way. Melissa's rapid attacks during the prosecution, Norris burning enemy groups, and Luke dealing with final blows. It had worked before. Norris thought that would be controllable. Luke and Norris stayed behind for now, waiting to jump if necessary. Kush and Melissa went forward. The clergyman's protective barrier faded when they entered, and the skeletons began to rise. They both went ahead without hesitation. Kush was excited, confident that they would wipe out their enemies quickly. Luke, watching from behind, commented on how dumb skeletons were to be in sunlight. Kush laughed, saying the reward money was practically theirs. But before he could finish his thinking, one of the skeletons shook his gun and hit him hard in the face. Another hit Melissa. They both flew through the air and fell to the ground. Norris and Luke were there, shocked. As the two frontline fighters sat down, more undead enemies began to approach. The skeletons started beating them while they were still down. Luke called Norris in a panic, saying they'd die if they didn't act fast. Norris quickly began to sing a fire spell. He asked for hell, invoking a fireball. But instead of a massive flame, it was a small compact flame. Luke was confused. What good would a little fireball do? Norris explained it was condensed heat. It should still hit hard, even if it looks small. He sent the flame to the skeletons. It hit, but it barely did any damage. The undead didn't even slow down, and now they were turning their attention to Luke and Norris. The group fled quickly and locked the church gate behind them. His mission to defeat a horde of skeleton knights in the old church, a search for Patent C, had ended in failure. The next day they tried again, this time to go after the orcs. Melissa went into action when the orcs approached. She fell on one and stabbed her with the sword, but the blade got stuck. She was surprised she didn't fall right away. Before anyone could react, the orc grabbed her by the arm and threw her in the air. It was like I was trying to take her away. She was almost left in her underwear while fighting, asking for help. Orc looked at her for a moment and dropped her, turning around and leaving. Norris and Luke started laughing, saying she wasn't even the orc guy. She was furious and ashamed. Kush saw the orc's back and thought it was the perfect chance to attack. He cut with the sword, but the blade jumped. The orc, now feeling the blow from behind, turned angry. I was furious. Before Kush could react, he hit Melissa hard, telling them to fly. Hunting search for the Dork post also failed. A few days later, they were back in the guild of the adventurers of the capital. Everyone seemed completely defeated. They still blamed Gail for all his recent failures. Kush agreed, especially because he was forced to sell his favorite equipment to keep floating. Around them, other adventurers were whispering about how far the once great pack of wolves had fallen. Norris said when they had gold again, they'd go after Gail. Luke joked that maybe Gail was selling merchandise in a market. Kush agreed and asked what the search for the day was. The leprechaun, perhaps. Melissa said it at least seemed feasible. But when they got back from the mission, they looked even worse than before. Beaten, tired, and barely able to walk, they went back to the guild. Guild's receptionist asked if they failed again. They freaked her out. cursed Kush, saying everything had been unfair. Thinking of when they accepted the elves' search, the villagers were shocked and grateful that an elite Shrank party was dealing with it. They said they'd support them any way they could. Kush assured the residents they'd take care of everything. He said they wouldn't even have to lift a finger. Later, the villagers arrived riding horses. Things went wrong from the beginning. The gang of Shrank wolves was completely crushed and beaten by the leprechauns. In the guild again, Kush explained what happened. The villagers refused to pay them and called them lazy and useless. Guild's receptionist replied that maybe they should give up their Shrank license. Kush got angry and grabbed the collar, demanding an easier search. But she wasn't scared. She grabbed his hand and hit him hard in the face. Kush fell to the ground. The other 3 members of the party stayed there, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, far away in the cemetery, Gail was underground, facing a new group of undead. The lower he went, the thicker the wandering souls got. There was a lot of valuable material in this crypt, and he was planning to collect everything. Moria was standing next to him, pulling her arm. She asked if there was anything nearby. He said there was nothing there, but she could hear the click of the bones and didn't believe him. She held firmly to him, eyes closed, as they walked forward. He told her to stop holding him like this. She insisted on feeling something around them. Then something came up. A bony arm rose from a grave, followed by a normal skeleton. So a much larger skeleton crawled up too. She asked if she could open her eyes, saying it would be less scary if she could see it. Gail thought it might make things worse for her. He said there was nothing there and started a countdown. As he said the final number, he waved his hand and cast a spell. Dispulse. The magic worked, and the skeleton dissolved into dust. When she opened her eyes, the undead were gone. She asked if he really used a spell to defeat him. He said yes, it was easy. She was shocked. Eliminating a curse to defeat an undead, she had never heard of it before. He explained that it was similar to what priests do. She argued that priests use sacred magic to purify evil, but Gail's magic was not the same. He admitted it wasn't exactly sacred magic, and it wasn't a good idea to use it most of the time. She asked why, and he tried to think of the best way to explain it. First, he wanted her to understand that what he was doing was not to ward off the dead. It was more like he was listening to their stories. Gail was holding a skull in her hand, while Moria was around, looking insecure about what he had just explained. She didn't understand what he meant when she said she heard the undead. To help you understand. He asked what she thought made the undead go up and walk around. She guessed it could be magic or malice. He said she was right. Soon after, a dead woman went up after her, and she screamed with fear. Gail quickly turned and defeated. He explained that this was something common in crypts like the one they were in, undead appearing out of nowhere. He pointed out that the undead don't like being cleansed or banned. He used a spell to demonstrate how they reacted. He asked her to imagine things from the undead's point of view. They were beings who returned to the world of the living because they had grudges or regrets. Then someone shows up, yells at them with some holy order, and tries to erase them without even hearing what they wanted or why they came back. Moria still didn't understand, so he asked her to think about when she was a child, if she was reprimanded by her parents without being allowed to explain herself. A souvenir came to her. Her father once yelled at her for wanting to be adventurous. He insisted that girls shouldn't dream about things like that. Even when she said that other girls were doing this, he hit his fist with rage and told her to stop. Gail brought her back to the present. He said the undead often have emotional leftovers, feelings they couldn't handle when they died. Some died hungry and are still chasing this hunger. Others died alone and now feel completely abandoned. Sometimes the grudges were stronger, like someone tortured to death by a crime he didn't commit. These feelings keep them from moving on. He explained that just listening to these feelings and showing a little understanding can help these spirits loosen up. So he took her to a coffin and opened it. An undead man got up. Moria was trembling with fear. A dark skeleton knight has emerged. He was a very dangerous guy, not something that people in supporting roles could handle. Actually, up close, it was even more dangerous than a lich. Without realizing it, Moria held on tight to Gail. His face was pressed on her chest, and he said he couldn't breathe. He raised her up a little higher to see the skeleton knight. Since she wasn't letting go, he just walked her in his arms. The undead drew their sword and looked at them. Moria started crying in fear. Gail calmly pointed his finger at the undead and cast a spell. The spell worked, the light shone, and the undead fell apart. He put her down, saying it was over. Looking at where the skeleton was, a ghostly figure appeared. He was wearing a knight's uniform. He leaned over to Gail and then disappeared. Gail smiled. Moria was shocked. She didn't understand what had happened. That skeleton had been a brank monster, and yet, after he disappeared, that young man's ghost had appeared. Gail explained that the man had probably died before he could say goodbye to someone important, his fiancée. That regret may have been what turned him into an undead. Moria asked how she could be sure. Gail said she learned to read the subtle signs, the little clues the undead left behind. He became good at it while crafting cursed equipment. Normally, if he listens to their story and responds kindly, they move on peacefully. Moria realized that all the undead wanted was sympathy, not advice, just understanding. Gail agreed. The undead were human, too. That's how he handled them. Not fighting, but helping them move on. As a bonus, since he did not purify them with sacred magic, he could collect materials of better quality. Holy magic removed all cursed energy, which was not good for your kind of work. Then a stronger undead appeared nearby, and Moria was overwhelmed. She realized that everything Gail said went against what she was taught about the undead. They went deeper into the crypt, and she looked at it carefully. She asked if he saw the undead as easy targets. He admitted it to him. For now, they were just materials. She got mad, grabbed his collar, and shook him furiously. She yelled at him, saying that he treated the undead as objects, as if they were easy fights, and demanded that he apologize to all the priests in the world. Gail was stunned by how suddenly she freaked out. He didn't understand why anyone would be upset with him. From his point of view, it was a win. He helped the undead move on, and he got their materials too. Moria couldn't believe how casually he treated everything. Her head jumped from thinking how strange Gail was. He asked her to stop screaming in his ear. So, gently, he asked if she wanted to hold his hand. She said yes. They kept going down the stairs and reached the lowest level of the crypt. This area was different. It was much brighter than the rest. Around them were strong, undead, skeleton knights, ghouls, archers, and dark spirits who seemed to be connected to the afterlife. She even saw wights. She counted at least 50 enemies. Moria realized that if enough pale souls of these undead were gathered in one place, they could illuminate a room like this. Gail asked if she was keeping her eyes open. She said she was fine. She was used to it now. Moria got tense. Gail realized she was lying. She wasn't very good at it. He started looking curious. She asked what he was doing, and he turned to say he was just wondering why there was no quilt in the crypt. Moria suggested that maybe that meant they'd have to come back another time. While she was talking, she didn't notice her bat slipping out of her hand. It fell with a loud noise that echoed through the crypt. All the undead nearby suddenly turned to sound. Fear took care of her. She thought they were doomed. But instead of attacking, the undead stayed there, trembling, confused, and nervous. She pushed Gail to hide behind a pillar. Then a new undead figure appeared behind a big door. This one was different. It carried a horn and irradiated energy. He wasn't an ordinary undead man. He was a wizard, one of the most dangerous guys. These were classified as disaster threats. One could create an entire army of undead and spread fear and destruction across the earth. Seeing one here was scary. But to her surprise, Gail was excited. This was exactly the kind of creature he expected to find. Moria was horrified. To fight like that, you'd need a high-ranking priest, and Gail. He didn't even go to church on his days off. Before she could say anything else, an explosion shook the crypt. The pillar they were hiding behind fell into rubble. Even in the dust, Gail said she didn't go to church. He stayed home, making cursed equipment and spells. Another explosion. Moria quickly hid behind him as the most magical tore the air. She looked at the wizard. His power was flowing into the other undead, almost like a wave. Now the other undead began to walk towards them. They ran. Moria screamed at Gail to stop running randomly. They needed to get out fast. Only one blow from the wizard would be the end of them. But Gail begged her to wait, saying she needed another moment. She asked what he meant. He took something out of the bag and stabbed her on the floor. Suddenly, a powerful wave of light spread. The undead trapped in the explosion burned with sacred energy. Gail sang a spell. Disperse the blessing, Moria gasped. It was a spell only the high priests could use. I wanted to save people from deadly curses. He created something so powerful on his own. The black mist covering the undead is gone. For a moment, they could be seen in their human forms again, then slowly disappeared, leaving a peaceful silence behind. Later, Gail stretched out and said the air seemed cooler. Moria sat down, oppressed. She covered her face with her hands and swore she would never go to a crypt again. Who beats an army of undead like it's nothing and calls it a trip? That doesn't happen. Gail thought you were overreacting. For him, undead wizards can be found in crypts like this all the time. He thought this was probably a nobleman in life who once ruled the place. Moria asked if he'd gone to many crypts. Gail smiled, grabbing her purse with enthusiasm. Crypts were exciting to him, especially when he found materials to make cursed equipment. He loved creating new items. Moria gave him a tired look. He was obsessed with cursed things. Gail proudly wrapped her new treasures. His necklace rang. It was made with the sword and the wizard's staff. He thought it was amazing. Moria said she didn't like art. He was shocked. She was clearly losing. He wanted more people to appreciate cursed equipment like him. He said he even had a tent before. She asked how it was. He lit up, remembering a girl who liked his drawings. A lot of people said they were creative. Cursed equipment, after all, could serve as decoration that also offered protection. There was definitely a market for it. Moria still wasn't impressed. Gail said she asked. He shrunk and said he didn't care. People would turn up eventually. Moria said this wasn't happening. He insisted on proving her wrong with the equipment and the store. That made Moria remember when she heard about Gail. She got an offer from a party in the guild. The woman behind the counter said the group was called Wolfpack. They were shrank, very skilled, but they didn't have the best attitudes. She saw a man being severely scolded by others. They called him lazy and said he was too soft. It was Gail. At the time, Moria agreed to join because the payment was good. Gail got kicked out of the party that day. When she met him, he was quiet, stressed and insecure. But now, without anyone holding him, his eyes shone with hope. She could see. He was excited for the future. She smiled. Maybe things were fine like this. Gail asked what she meant. She said it was fun spending time with him. He played with her about almost crying earlier. She got mad and said she didn't count as crying. He laughed and thanked me. Getting kicked out of the party led him to a small farm town. Alone, even with money, would have been a lonely life, but having someone to laugh a lot with men. And that was all thanks to her. Moria looked at him and blushed. She screamed, asking why he was suddenly being so sweet. He caught her off guard and panicked, running away from him. But then, in a calm voice, she said she was okay with it too, and thanked him. Gail asked what you said, but you didn't answer. In her mind, she couldn't believe how ignorant he was. At the beginning of the chapter, Moria brought the reward money. She asked what Gail was planning to do with it. Gail thought they'd split evenly, but Moria disagreed. She felt like she didn't deserve any of this. In her mind, all she did was slow him down. Gail didn't see it that way. For him, being at a party meant sharing roles. But Moria wasn't convinced. All she did was carry some of his stuff. And she pointed out how much Gail had. It was much more than a high-level doorman could handle. When she asked how he was managing, Gail raised her hand and revealed a skull bracelet he was wearing. Moria was disgusted, seemed scary. He explained that the bracelet was cursed. Gave him a lot of effects, extra storage space, increased strength, and even stress relief. Had done it himself, just so he could carry more equipment. Moria was shocked. A tool like this could completely change the way wars were fought, she thought. She covered her face with her hand in disbelief. Curious, she asked if he ever saw any normal magic items, the kind sold in stores. Gail insisted. As a cursor, he said it was important to stay up to date with trends. but he also admitted that he found most of it boring. Moria remembered that appearance was not the point. If he really had seen how magic tools worked, he should have known that most of them only have a single effect. This is how it should be. Otherwise, people cannot handle energy and tools become unstable. Even the best magical item purchased in the store can only improve 10% in one area. Anything beyond that, items with multiple powerful effects were extremely rare, even legendary. Items like this were known as artifacts. Gail just laughed. He compared them to national treasures and said they all looked lame. Moria felt frustrated. He clearly didn't understand or care about how serious this was. In his mind, the equipment Gail created was undeniably powerful, but his thinking was completely off the rails. He had no taste, no sense of balance or common understanding. She shook her fist, pissed off. Gail didn't see the big deal. To him, it was all innovation. If anyone could be creative enough, they could build items with whatever effect they wanted. Until it piles up several effects together. That's how the damn equipment worked. Moria thought differently. If it was that easy, people wouldn't spend that much money on magical equipment bought by the store. She went back to him again. For Gail, common magic items were basically toys. He offered to make one for her just for fun. She refused. In her head, she began to think more seriously about cursed equipment. The downside was that it always came with risks. Once someone wore cursed equipment, I couldn't get it out on my own. I needed a special ability to safely remove it. Not only that, but the curse has always demanded a price. Some items may increase your attack power, but make it weak under sunlight. Others may confuse your mind and make it impossible to distinguish allies from enemies. But then she imagined, what if there was a cursed craftsman who could control all this? What if they could leave the curse on purpose and even remodel what was needed and what was returned? What if they could control the risk and the reward? Moria trembled at the thought. If that were possible, maybe Gail was a genius, a master craftsman capable of changing the world. Gail clearly believed that. He was proud of his projects and thought they were amazing. Moria gave him a sarcastic smile and said, "No one would ever appreciate them." Gail accused her of building it and knocked it down. In her mind, she agreed. As Gail continued to draw equipment like him, the world would never understand how talented he really was. So Gail pointed forward. The city was finally in sight. He saw a stroller nearby and called Moria for a ride, when he ran to the owner for help. Moria looked at him and thought Gail, the witchcraft. He was a little weird, but neat. She wouldn't mind being at his party again someday. Later, they arrived at the Guild of Adventurers. The receptionist, Gimli, greeted them joyfully, but she was surprised to see them back so quickly. She asked if they gave up the mission. Gail said it was the opposite, and he put several heavy bags on the counter for her to inspect. He told her to check that everything was real. Inside the bags were the remains of black skeletons, dark skeletons, and even signs of a mighty sorcerer. Gimli was impressed. She offered Tennyson bonus and increased to 30 cent. Moria intervened. She reminded Gimli that the work should involve only liches, but the dungeon had expanded and ended up containing a sorcerer, something much more dangerous. You could have killed them easily. She looked at Gimli seriously. First, the guild gave them wrong information. Now Gimli was offering a bonus like it paid off. Is that how an alliance should work? Gimli apologized. She explained that their guild was small, and sometimes their information was not accurate. She asked if 20% would be okay. Moria agreed reluctantly. Gail looked at her, confused about why she was so upset. Moria said that kind of thing mattered. The proper preparation was all in an adventure. What if they had prepared to shoot monsters and ended up facing ice monsters? That could be fatal. Gail responded by saying she was kind enough to care so much. Moria responded abruptly. She wasn't trying to be. Before she could go on, Gimli cut them off. Gimli apologized to Gail, explaining that she was not yet used to working in a guild. Gail didn't care, since most people don't usually go deep in dangerous crypts. Gimli admitted it was her fault to trust a gravedigger. She looked down, clearly feeling bad. In Gail's head, he couldn't help but think she was pretty when she felt guilty. He assured her it was no big deal. Exploring crypts was something he was very good at. Even though Gail wanted to protect her, He tried to contain the feeling. Gimli's eyes shone when he mentioned he'd be patrolling the area sometimes. She hugged him to thank him. Gail was surprised again. Gimli didn't look like that, but she was a guild master. That's when Moria suddenly separated them, telling Gimli to let Gail go. Gail turned to Gimli and asked if she was ready to start evaluating things. Gimli said yes. Moria made a strange comment, asking Gail if she liked girls who looked very young. Gail was confused and completely denied it, asking where it came from. Moria pointed out how kind she was to Gimli and even accused him of staring at her too much. Gail blushed and insisted it wasn't true. Moria cleaned it up, saying it was none of her business, but she turned her back with an angry look. Gail asked why she was acting like this. Moria said no, and then revealed something surprising. Gimli wasn't as young as he looked. Actually, Gimli was about 100 years old. Suddenly, something sharp hit the ground near them. Gimli said her hand slipped, but it seemed pretty clear that she had played on purpose. She acted innocent and changed the subject, saying that she would give them her search reward and share what she has valued so far. Gail and Moria were caught off guard, realizing Gimli had pointed at them before. Gimli put the reward on the counter. Gail said that he and Moria should share the reward, but Moria tried to refuse since she thought Gail deserved everything. He insisted, so she accepted and thanked him. Gimli said they could go back to the rest of the reward later. She waved goodbye, and when she was alone, she thought about what happened. She couldn't believe that Moria had casually revealed a girl's real age. So someone called her. Gimli was surprised to see the person and asked what he wanted. The voice said they had important information. Gimli has agreed to listen since the guild was closed at night. The person showed up and gave the news. There was an attempt to kill Princess Cara, but she survived. Apparently, she was using cursed equipment that stopped her from dying instantly. Gimli was surprised that it was not a sacred artifact like the shield of an angel. The person confirmed it was nothing of the Holy Church. It was an unknown cursed object. Gimli found this very interesting. She asked who the attackers were, and the person was not sure, but based on how they operated, it looked like a military group. Gimli thought it might be something planned by the Empire. She laughed gently, thinking it was a complicated situation. The person said he'd share more details later. Gimli thanked me and said it might be connected to his own mission. She asked if there were other interesting stories, but the person said it was all for now. Gimli threw a coin in thanks. The person responded respectfully and disappeared. Gimli talked to herself, thinking the Empire wasn't joking. Going after Princess Cara, one of the main heirs to the throne, meant there could be trouble within the royal family. Between the Empire, the capital, and that mysterious cursed item, something big was clearly happening. So your thoughts went to Gail. She had noticed something strange about him from the beginning. He had an alarming amount of cursed equipment hidden under his cloak, and yet it didn't seem to hurt him. That wasn't normal. In addition, he managed to defeat a mighty sorcerer with only one wizard of support. That meant someone on his team was treating curses like they were nothing and dead-living enemies like they were weak. Later, while taking a shower, Gimli kept thinking about Gail. He was probably a curse artist, someone who did and dealt with cursed objects. Gimli was a dark elf, and his species was also cursed. The only way to break his curse and regain his strength was to find the heart of the devil the Empire possessed. For now, Gimli worked undercover as guild boss. His goal was to gather information and seek a path through the tight defenses of the Empire. If there was a struggle between the Empire and capital soon, it could be your chance to escape. And now she had met someone like Gail, who could be the key to everything. She thought for herself, what if that cursed object used to protect Princess Cara was really something Gail created? She smiled just thinking. Later she opened a door and looked at some items, thinking again how fascinating Gail really was. Meanwhile, in the capital, a priest had just told Gail's old party something shocking. None of them were cursed anymore. They were confused. The priest said they were completely clean, with no trace of a curse. One of them, Kush, didn't believe it. He told the priest that they came there to remove the curses Gail supposedly had placed upon them as revenge, so that they could return to full power. But now, they weren't sure what to believe. The priest explained to the group that there were definitely signs that they had been cursed. But based on what he saw, they were completely free from any curse since the day Gail left his team. In fact, it was a miracle they survived the powerful curses that once affected them. Later, as they left the church, they began talking to each other. It seemed that what the priest was actually saying was that the strength they had now could be the true extent of their natural abilities, and that curses never held them. Kush didn't want to accept that. He squeezed his fist of frustration, refusing to believe. He thought the priest should be incompetent. Luke admitted he didn't want to believe it either, but he couldn't deny the thought by entering. What if he was a below-average wizard all the time? Kush tried to forget the idea and said he needed to concentrate on finding Gail. He assumed Gail must be broken and living on the streets now, so they should start looking for alleys instead of main roads. But Luke was finished. He apologized, said he couldn't go on and started leaving. Kush screamed after him, confused by what he meant. Luke explained that they sold almost all the equipment just to pay for the priest's food and help. They were completely broken now. They didn't even have the money to stay in an inn, so they looked so tired. According to him, they belonged to alleys now. Kush didn't believe Luke would say that to his face and catch him. Luke endeavored to free himself, asking Kush to let go. Then suddenly Luke froze in place. Kush was worried, asking what was wrong. Luke didn't respond at first, but then he said that maybe it was a really good thing they hadn't found Gail yet. Kush was totally confused, not understanding what Luke meant. Luke told him to take a look at the warning board. Kush ran to him and took a newspaper from him. Melissa and Norris were nearby, observing curiously, wondering what caught Kush's attention suddenly. Luke laughed, saying Kush might not be so wrong. Kush came out laughing as he looked at the paper. He told the others their luck was finally changing. The paper was a real poster. He showed a picture of Gail and said he was wanted, killed, or alive by the royal government. There was a promise of reward for anyone who brought it, and even those who had useful information could make money. The warning told people to report to the nearest royal government if they saw Gail. It was signed by German Jerkenfer, the head of the royal office. Kush couldn't believe what he was reading. Gail became a wanted man. Everyone started laughing, feeling like they had a big chance. Kush pointed out that even if they shared what they knew, they could make some money. But if they really captured Gail and brought him in, they could be rewarded with riches, noble titles, maybe even expensive land or jewelry, anything they wanted. Now they were more excited than ever. They decided they needed to act quickly and seize the opportunity. Even if the royal office wasn't open yet, they wouldn't mind. They had more than just rumors. They were Gail's ex-partners. This meant that they could give more useful information than anyone else. And in return, they were sure they would receive a reward that was more than just a little gold. The princess guy wondered if the informants Vivian found were reliable. She suspected they might just be con artists trying to earn the reward money. Vivian confidently replied that they were not fake. In fact, they were a group of Srank adventurers from the Guild of the Capital. Their identities had already been confirmed. According to them, they were working with the man in question, Gail, until recently. Before Vivian could explain more, the loud laughter came from the room where the adventurers were waiting. One of them even had his feet on the table, acting disrespectful. Luke was looking at the fancy carpet and joking about how expensive it must have been, saying it was a waste of taxpayers' money. Norris was eating cakes and said they were delicious. Melissa agreed and asked for more. Kush complained about how long royalty kept them waiting and joked that they should charge a late fee to the palace. From the outside, Princess Cara was secretly watching the group and commented to Vivian that they did not seem very polite. She even wondered if they were really adventurous. Vivian replied that they were more or less. Inside, Kush noticed them watching and calling, asking what they were looking at. He saw Cara and referred to her rudely as the fancy lady. Cara asked Vivian to confirm her identity. He was Kush, right? Kush went to face without realizing who she was. He spoke as if it were the most important in the room, saying that if she meant him, she should refer to him as Mr. Cush. He boasted that his party was the best group of adventurers in town, and that only royalty had the right to call him by his first name. When Vivian was about to intervene, Cara gently stopped her. Dude quietly apologized for not performing earlier. She revealed her full name, Garkin Face. She explained that she was the princess of this country, even if things didn't always seem. She admitted she had Cush wait because she was watching and studying them first. So she politely asked him to accept his apology. After that, when the princess sat down, Cush and his whole group fell to their knees, bowing their heads to the ground. Cush apologized for acting rudely before. Cara said he didn't want to talk about it. And I told them to move on with the real reason they were meeting. Cush was then asked if he really knew the man on the wanted poster. The group looked and smiled confidently. They said they knew him. Vivian asked them to describe the young man they were talking about. Cush replied that he had black hair, dark eyes, and a medium-sized structure. Vivian replied that the description could fit thousands of people. Melissa added that the guy also dressed very badly. He wore a strange blue-green jacket. The princess' eyes lit up with interest, and she urged them to continue. Norris mentioned that the accessories he made were also very lame, without any sense of fashion. The princess quietly disagreed. For her, the items Gail made were wonderful, not lame. The party was confused by her reaction. Norris got nervous and asked for a moment to explain. He told the princess the person they were talking about was Gail. He was your ex-partner, a craftsman of the curse. Norris asked you to look at some of the things Gail created. Vivian was surprised, wondering what the items were. When she examined them, there was no doubt they were cursed objects. Cara asked what she meant by that. Vivian explained that during the investigation, they discovered something interesting. They say this cursed craftsman would sell items in his tent and include talismans as extras in customer purchases. Cara was surprised. She bought something from Gail, but she didn't get one of those talismans. Vivian guessed that maybe it was because Gail was about to close the day, or maybe she forgot because Cara was in a hurry. Vivian turned to Luke and questioned him about the items. She asked if he was sure they were actually made by Gail, and not something he had picked up elsewhere. Luke quickly confirmed it was Gail's job. He almost admitted to stealing them, but then corrected himself and said he had received directly from Gail. Luke then presented 3 of Gail's cursed items: the dark skeleton's eyetooth ring, the carnivorous palette knife, and the witch powder necklace. Cush was surprised that Luke carried so many cursed items from Gail all this time. Norris wondered if these cursed objects were the reason for all your recent bad luck. He also noticed that even the princess' face seemed offended, but actually, the princess was covering her mouth in shock, so she quickly calmed down. A moment later, her excitement took over and she declared she was in heaven. She embraced all of Gail's items firmly and smiled with joy, so she realized the others were watching. The adventurers were stunned by their unexpected reaction. Trying to be more composed, she sat down again and said it looked like at least a little of what they told her was true. Cush made sure it was all true. Cara then told Vivian to give them the reward. At the sound of it, the party's eyes shone with excitement. Vivian asked Cara if she was sure about rewarding or if she was just dazzled by all the weird garbage they brought. Cara confirmed he was serious. She gave Cush a bag of coins as an advance on the job. She said she needed to thank Gail personally, and made it clear that she expected Cush to take the mission seriously. Cush fell to his knees and promised he could count on them. He, Cush Bilbour, leader of the shrank group of adventurers known as Wolfpack, would risk his life in completing the task. Later, outside the palace, Cush imagined the rewards they would receive: money, a real job, maybe even more. Melissa congratulated him on doing a good job. Norris reminded the group that they needed to start looking for their old friend Gail immediately. Luke said it would be easy. They'd split up and search all over the capital. Cush prepared the plan. They spent 3 years together, so he felt confident he could figure out what Gail might be doing now. Melissa checked the merchant stalls and the local guilds. Gail may have started running a tent again. Norris was investigating the association of nearby adventurers and taverns. Ever since he met Gail, he could still be in the same places. Luke would go to the coach stations and see if Gail had left town. Kush did think Gail would run away, but he wanted to cover all the possibilities. Kush also noted that the princess seemed to have her own motives. She really stressed that she wanted to thank Gail. Melissa wanted to know what kind of situation Gail could have messed with the royal family. Luke joked that when they found Gail, they'd be grateful for everything they've suffered since he left. Norris agreed. His idea of gratitude included assaulting him, delivering him to the palace, and imagining all kinds of punishments like skinning or burning. They laughed, completely misunderstood what Princess Cara really meant by thanking Gail. Meanwhile, back to the castle, Vivian asked the princess if they trusted the wolf party too much. She didn't expect Cara to be so serious about finding Gail. Cara pointed out that the royal palace had not yet been able to find it, and that it was worth trying something different. Vivian looked at the updated poster on Gail's face. Cara said that since the Wolfpack was officially classified as S, it was time to see what they really could do. Still, she trusted Vivian to keep an eye on them. Vivian promised. Cara then turned the poster, repeating Gail's name for herself. Gail, the curse maker. She looked at the cursed ring she wore and said she was really looking forward to learning more about it. She smiled softly at herself. Far away in Farmage City, Gail sneezed all of a sudden. He wondered if anyone who liked his work was talking about him. So he got excited again and went back to work. Talking to yourself happy while preparing another powerful item. He was polishing the bones of the ribs of a lich to give them magical resistance and stronger power of dark elements. That would lessen your protection from light magic and melee attacks. But he had a plan. He was mixing with dark skeleton bones in powder, which would increase melee strength and nullify weakness. To finish it, he added the core of a thunder to give it an increase of light elements. The result was a powerful new sword. He did this from a wizard's weapon and customized it with his own talismans. It was a masterpiece, a souvenir of his time in Farmage. He called him Divide, a great sword created by a cursed wise man. It had all sorts of improvements, a blood effect on the blade, a skill called Bloodsucker to increase user resistance, plus 150% cutting power, increased resistance to magic, lighter weight, and extra dustproof protection. Suddenly, Maura walked into Gail's room and hit him, clearly angry. Gail was confused about why she was there. Maura explained that her room was next door and that she could hear him day and night. She also complained about the darkness and the terrible smell in her room. And then she opened the window to let some fresh air in. She remembered that today was the day he was supposed to start selling his goods on the market. As the weather was good, she said she'd go with him. Gail agreed, and later he was at the market screaming loudly, trying to get people's attention to his tent. He was proudly calling customers, announcing his cursed items made from newly harvested undead materials. Around him other salesmen were also working hard. Some sold fresh bread, others offered rice balls for breakfast. Their tents were clean and inviting. Maura watched Gail with a tired, unaffected look. The market was crowded and lively, with tents full of all sides. A rice salesman attracted a customer who was impressed by some new ingredients being used and bought a rice ball. Meanwhile, Gail kept calling, trying to sell her cursed items, even suggesting that her equipment could go well with the food that people were buying. No one was interested. Other customers praised a butcher who had the softest, most juicy turkey legs. Gail jumped again, telling them to enjoy the food using their damn skeleton sticks, claiming they could help soften the hard meat. The men refused him again. Next, Gail tried to convince a merchant to check his cursed sword made from a sorcerer's sword. The merchant found it disgusting and quickly fled. Maura, seeing all this, asked what he was doing. Gail thought Maura was interested in the sword and offered a discount, but she denied it and tried to take it away from him. He embraced the sword protectively, refusing to surrender it. He insisted it was valuable, and not even Maura could make him give up. Maura warned him that if he went on like this, the whole town would start turning on him. She was frustrated because he sold strange and cursed things at dawn, especially near food stalls. Gail argued that the Merchant Association told him that the best times for sales were morning and night. Maura replied that it may be true, for food stalls, but no one looking for breakfast wanted cursed weapons or dangerous magic items. She asked if he understood how supply and demand worked. Gail said yes. It was just about people wanting things and merchants selling them. Maura told him to think better about what people in an agricultural town really wanted. He needed to adjust his business to suit the city better. When she asked what she could sell in a place like a farm, Gail started listing ideas: poisonous talismans, paralysis scrolls, slow darts, cursed daggers and buckles. Then he got excited and added cursed tracks to the list. Morris had enough. She grabbed Gail and started dragging him away from her tent. He protested, worried people would steal his stuff if he left them unattended. Maura told him not to worry. Their assets were so scary that no one would want to steal them. Later, a woman named Gimli was laughing, saying Maura must have trouble dealing with someone like Gail. Maura and Gail quickly shouted that they were not partners, but Gimli provoked them more, pointing out how perfectly synchronized they were. Gail told Gimli that he had paid good money to the Merchant Association to get a place in the market. Gimli asked how much. Gail said she paid for a gold coin. Maura was shocked. It was a huge amount. She asked if it was really the price of a tent on the farm. Gimli said absolutely no. Gail had been robbed. Gail didn't believe me. He said it was the busiest area on the market. Gimli shook his head. Selling stuff wasn't just a busy place. She explained that most people in agriculture were farmers traveling between their homes and the fields. They needed agricultural tools, not cursed objects. Gail felt discouraged and said the situation was ridiculous. Gimli replied that there was no market for cursed goods. Adventurers who worked with your guild might be interested. Gail's eyes glowed with hope, but Gimli warned him that adventurers alone would not be enough to fix his situation. First, he needed to move the tent somewhere else. She asked if he tried to get a seat in one of the nicest districts. Gail said the areas were already full. Gimli asked if it really looked like him. Gail admitted that he and Maura had passed through that part of town earlier, and there was definitely room. Maura said she didn't see anywhere open. Gimli smiled consciously. Things were starting to make sense now. She explained that while the farm was not a huge city, it was large enough that even powerful guilds of the capital had established branches there. So she suddenly said they were leaving. Maura asked where they were going. Gimli smiled again, and they said they were going to Smith's Guild. Maura was confused and asked why. Gail wondered why they were visiting the Blacksmith's Guild instead of the Merchant's Guild, especially since the goal was to find a better place for him. Gimli explained that in agriculture, the balance of power was somewhat unusual. The Merchant's Guild didn't have much influence. The Smith's Guild, however, was the strongest. There were more people, more resources, and more importance in this town. That's why Gail needed to introduce herself to them. Maura found that this meant that the Merchant's Guild basically responded to the Blacksmith's Guild. Gimli praised her quick thinking, playing about her being a support wizard. Then she explained that in an agricultural city, metal tools were in high demand. People needed blacksmiths to build and fix things. The Smith's Guild had deep roots in agriculture, and they made tools adapted to the local environment. That's why they had so much power here. Gail asked if meeting the guild leader could get a place in a better part of town. Gimli said yes, but he remembered it would be best to bring a good gift. Gail's eyes glowed. He had something ready, a cursed necklace and its precious weapon, a sword he called the Divide. When he drew the sword, the people around were terrified. Gimli shook, and Maura, angry, grabbed Gail by her hair. And I told him to stop causing a scene. Gimli asked what kind of sword it was. At that moment, Maura realized why Gimli made them buy a lot of things at the market earlier. It was to bring proper gifts. Maura offered to carry the presents and told Gail that she just needed to be respectful and bow her head. Gail wasn't sure why. He thought any blacksmith would immediately appreciate the quality of his sword. Maura pointed out that people inside the guild were literally hiding when they saw it. They were scared, not impressed. They went into the blacksmith's guild and saw how busy he was. Everyone inside was working hard, hammering metal and forging items. The place was loud and warm. Maura started complaining about the heat. While Gail's eyes were shining, he was clearly fascinated by the vision of so much art happening at the same time. Maura asked if there was a service desk anywhere, but Gimli explained that even if it was called guild, it was really just a giant forge where Smith worked. A man came after them, warning them as he passed by. Gail apologized, realizing how hot it was in there. He asked if they should invite themselves in, but Gimli thought screaming loud enough would make the boss show up. Maura didn't love that plan, but she tried. Her voice wasn't loud enough with the metal sound, so Gimli decided to show her how it was done. She gave a great breath and cried out the name Shireena. Immediately, someone opened a door and threw something at them. A big explosion followed like a huge hammer came flying in its way. A figure came out, moaning about the noise. This was Shireena, the one they called. She yelled at them, clearly angry at the interruption so early. Maura was shocked to see that Shireena was a dwarf, while Gail was surprised that Shireena was a woman. Gimli laughed at both reactions. Shireena recognized Gimli and made a sarcastic comment about her being a dark elf from a dark forest. Gimli shot back with his own insult, calling Shireena a cave dweller. They clearly had a long-standing rivalry. Maura quietly told Gail that elves and dwarves usually didn't get along, and she began to wonder if they had made a mistake coming here. But Gimli smiled and reassured them. She brought them here for a reason and supported them to the end. She introduced Shireena as the guild's boss, although she also called her a bit hard-headed brute. Shireena greeted them correctly, although she reacted to Gimli's insult with irritation. Gail looked at Shireena as she shook his hand. He soon realized that her hands were large for her size, rough and covered in small cuts, signs of someone who had spent years working on a forge. His arms were strong, and his skin had been darkened by the heat of the furnace. She was clearly a master of his art, Maura called him, but Gail and Shireena were still in visual contact. They quietly recognized themselves as fellow artisans, people who had worked hard on their abilities. They smiled at each other, understanding each other in a way that words did not need to explain. Gimli noticed his look and asked why they were looking at each other. Gail and Shireena denied it, saying it made things seem strange. Maura didn't like it while Gimli was smiling, enjoying the strange moment. Maura reminded everyone to get back to business, and Gimli laughed, already on the same page. Gimli introduced Gail as the new guy from the capital who wanted to set up a tent and was there to meet the guild leader. Shireena, the guide, wasn't impressed at first. She was having a difficult day. There was a serious shortage of materials, and she was busy early. She thought you were wasting your time. But then she realized something important. If Gail only set up a tent where he wanted without going through the proper steps, he could create problems with the Merchants' Guild that could cause trouble. Shireena said it was good that they were doing things the right way, showing respect and checking first. She made it clear that Smith's Guild wasn't trying to control the whole town. But because they handled so many repairs and were involved in people's daily lives, they naturally became deeply connected to the community over time. Unlike the capital where things were thrown away, this town preferred to fix and reuse. And somehow, through all this, Shireena had ended up as one of the most important people in Farmage. Shireena sat down and asked Gail's name. She warned him not to take everything Gimli said very seriously. According to her, Gimli had a big mouth and liked to exaggerate. Gimli played back, pretending to be offended, while Shireena turned her eyes and said she would go ahead and write the paperwork for Gail. Gail was grateful, and Maura applauded for having succeeded. She and Gail celebrated with a touch here. But Shireena said not to get too excited yet. It wouldn't be that easy. She made it clear she wasn't doing free favors. If they wanted her official approval, she expected something in return. This wasn't a charity. If they scratched her back, she'd scratch theirs. When she mentioned sincerity, Gail and Maura were confused. Maura responded first by offering a bottle of strong drink as a gift. Shireena liked that. Gail got excited and said she had something too, taking her sword. But Maura pushed him before he could get him out, warning him not to turn it into a personal art exhibit. She didn't think the sword was an appropriate gift in this situation. Gail insisted that Shireena would love it, but Maura wasn't having it. She even hit him to stop him. Shireena was surprised how often Maura slapped Gail, but suddenly she stopped talking. Her eyes were open when she noticed Gail's purse. Shireena went there and held Gail's purse. Gail was confused about what she was doing, but then Shireena pulled the bag and saw the sword inside. Her excitement appeared immediately. Gimli, watching them, made a playful comment about how Gail and Shireena were clearly creating nerds, and now they were in their element. Shireena raised the sword and said it was incredible, definitely not a common blade. She realized just looking at him. Gail was thrilled to recognize its value. He thanked her, calling her master of the guild, but Shireena said to call her Shireena. She didn't really care about fancy titles. Gail agreed and praised your skills. He was deeply moved by finally meeting someone who understood his work. A single tear rolled through the cheek. He screamed with joy. Shireena held the sword with pride. Maura wiped her throat out loud, clearly bothered by how close Gail and Shireena seemed to be getting. Gail asked if Shed caught a cold. Maura said no. Gimli realized Maura's mood and provoked her, saying that it was obvious what she was feeling. Maura attacked her to shut up. Shireena also noticed and asked if Maura found the place very dusty, suggesting that she could wait outside if it bothered her. But Maura said it wasn't that. She pointed out how close Gail and Shireena were. Gail and Shireena were surprised and asked if it really looked like that. With confidence, Gail said that Shireena deserved to be the leader of the Smith Association. He said he always believed that the right people would appreciate his work. Shireena explained that she herself was a forger and raised the sword toward the furnace to see better. She guessed that the base of the sword came from a drop of monster. It made him rare and valuable. So she noticed it had additional effects, ability to suck blood, improved cutting power, and dark elementary properties. She was very impressed. Gail smiled and said that Shireena had a good eye, but there was more to the sword than that. Shireena was intrigued and said, "I think I do." Shireena noticed how light the sword felt and guessed it had a light spell. Maura saw her swinging and pointed, but not happily. Gail explained that since Shireena was a craftsman, of course she would want to test the sword. But Maura meant something else. But Shireena agreed with Gail. There was no way she could resist a few blows to the sword. If you could cut off enemies, absorb their blood, and keep healing the user's resistance during the battle, it would make you perfect for someone fighting in the front lines. Although it was the size of a great sword, it was light enough to swing with one hand. You can fight all day without getting tired. It wasn't just good for the teams. Even an adventurer alone could survive a battle with a weapon like this. Gail added that the sword also had magical resistance and was made to be dust-proof. But more than anything, he thought it was super cool, and he was cursed too. Shireena smiled and said that magical resistance was really useful to people who couldn't use magic. What about the dust-proof part? This showed Gail really thought of everything. Adequate maintenance is very important for weapons. But then she stopped and asked about the last thing Gail said. When he mentioned how cool the sword looked, she said it wasn't what she meant. She didn't agree with his taste, but that wasn't the problem. Then his eyes opened. Suddenly, Shireena realized she couldn't drop her sword. Her hand was attached to him. Maura rolled her eyes, thinking we're going again. It was the problem of the cursed sword everywhere. Shireena screamed that she couldn't take her hand off. Gail seemed more concerned about not liking the sword. He reminded her that she was a guild master. Shireena hit him, saying that wasn't the point. She changed her mind. That sword was no good after all. Maura told Shireena to calm down and asked Gail to remove the curse. Gail got angry and asked why she didn't like the sword. He thought it was amazing. Maura yelled at him for not taking it seriously. Gimli watched chaos and laughed. Everyone was in a panic trying to get the sword out of Shireena's hand. Gimli thought to herself, despite the curse, Shireena had only said good things about the sword. Gail clearly had skills. He may even be more than a curse craftsman. Eventually, Shireena was able to pull her free hand. She blew and murmured about what a mess this turned out to be. Maura apologized and reminded Shireena that she warned Gail. Shireena disinfected her hand and said it was too late for apologies. She told Gail that if the sword was cursed, it should have been the first thing he said. It was the most important detail. Gail did think it was much, since he can lift the curse anytime. But Shireena disagreed. Just because he could remove it doesn't mean other people could. She asked if he thought the world revolved around him. Then she looked at Gimli and asked what happened to these two. Dealing with them was exhausting. Gimli told her to calm down, saying she didn't think Gail meant any harm. Shireena felt foolish for falling into the characteristics of the sword and taking what she now called a tacky weapon. If this is how Gail wanted to run a tent, she wouldn't allow it. Gail protested that it wasn't fair. Shireena tried her gifts too. Maura pointed out that she had bought the gift, and now Shireena used it to disinfect her cursed hand. Shireena agreed. She said she could enjoy the present now. She was barely breaking down even after this mess. If she wasn't a good person, she'd have called the guards by now. Gail was hurt, especially since she worked so hard on the sword. Shireena was frustrated and asked if he ever heard of what the client needed. Then she answered her own question. Clearly not. She said she wouldn't let him open a tent. If he started selling stuff like that around town, it would be a disaster. She said had already sold things in Dicey, and just giving him more chances can make things worse. Still, Shireena admitted Gail reminded her of a killer shark. You give him an inch, and he takes a mile. But she wasn't completely insensitive. She turned to Gail and asked if he really wanted to run a tent. Gail said yes. What did she think? Maura didn't leave it out of control and pinched him from behind, so Gail quickly bowed down and begged Shireena to let him open a tent. Maura apologized again, saying Gail was definitely a little unusual. But he had his good sides too. He was really a skilled curse dispenser, as Shireena had seen, and if you ignored your weird design style, your equipment was really very well done. Shireena said if Maura was willing to go so far for him, then maybe. But she hasn't seen it yet because they needed her help. If she was going to send a message of support to the trade union, that meant taking some responsibility. She asked Gail if he really understood that. Gail said yes. But Shireena wanted more than just words. She needed to see what kind of people they were. Maura asked what she wanted from them. They had no money. Shireena said she wasn't so mean. Who would ask a rookie for money? But she had a favor to ask. She asked Gail to guess what kind of favor someone would ask an adventurer. There was a mine nearby, Doghelm Mine. He was the only one near Farmage. Shireena wanted to send them there to deal with a monster. But it wasn't a normal search. Everyone who had gone so far was gone. They didn't even know what kind of monsters were in there. The mission was to make the mine safe again. It was a double mission. Shireena looked at them and asked if they were willing to accept. Inside the castle, Cara was confused by the report she had just heard. At first, she thought that a band of bandits pretending to be from the Empire had attacked her, but the truth was it was the Empire behind the attack. Vivian confirmed it with a smile. The Empire finally managed to force the captured assassins to speak. There was no doubt now. Cara had a strange feeling Vivian meant that they literally forced the killers to talk. The old man next to her agreed to your suspicions. He explained that the attempt on her life was linked to a power struggle within the Empire. From what he learned, the attack was ordered by the Prince of the Empire, who hired the assassins. The Emperor of the Empire was sick, and now the first and second princes were in conflict. The Crown Prince was the son of a concubine, while the second prince was a legitimate heir. Cara asked what that had to do with her. Vivian recalled that the king chose Cara to be the bride of the second prince as part of a political alliance between his two nations. Cara had never agreed to the marriage, but the old man, who served as her valet, explained that it was not up to her. Marriage was made between two countries, so his personal feelings did not change the agreement. Vivian explained that the people who tried to kill her were probably supporters of the Crown Prince. They saw marriage as a threat. If the second prince marries Cara, it could make him seem stronger and harm the Crown Prince's chances of gaining more power. So the assassination attempt was probably meant to stop the marriage and create more chaos. If the truth came out and damaged relations between his kingdoms, the Crown Prince would not care. He'd probably be happy about it. With the Empire now divided between two heirs, Vivian said two things could happen. First, the second prince would probably make a goodwill visit to Cara's kingdom to calm things down. Second, the crown prince would probably send another assassin. Cara was shocked. More killers. Vivian said they had the group of attackers confess, but there was still no solid evidence linking the crown prince to the crime. If the Empire denied involvement, there wouldn't be much his kingdom could do in response. They could protest, but they couldn't take serious action unless they were ready for war. And they weren't. Frustrated, Princess Cara slammed her hands on the table. She said the wedding had to be cancelled. She got up, then threw herself into bed, hiding her face. Vivian remembered that international agreements couldn't be cancelled like this. Cara whispered that she hated everything, especially because she already had a perfect engagement ring. Meanwhile, away from the castle, outside the Dogham mine near Farmage, Gail was trying to clarify the situation. He confirmed he was a curse craftsman. Maura, who was traveling with him, said she was a support wizard, but Gimli, who was also there, said she wouldn't count on it. She wasn't part of their party. Gail pointed out that both he and Maura were rearguards, magic users who fought since the backlines, and Gimli was not joining them. So, shouldn't they have another team to handle this mission? Shireena came in, remembering that they had already discussed it. There was no other party. That's exactly why this search got cold. Under normal circumstances, this job should only have been a search for notes, A, B, or C. But since no one did, the level of danger increased with time. Since they were already in front of the mine, Shireena told them to swallow and search. Gail and Maura hesitated, pointing out that they had just arrived in town. Gimli smiled and reminded Shireena that both helped define how the missions were classified. When a job is unfinished for a long time, the hazard classification increases. Shireena reminded Gimli that she had worked with her in those rules and told her not to make it look like she was the villain to execute them. Maura finally understood, because the search had continued for so long without being completed, had jumped all the way to double rating. Gail asked if that minute would be even greater if they ruined everything. Gimli laughed and said he could get to S. Maura's post didn't find anything funny. Gimli said many adventurers have recently disappeared. Maura guessed this mine must be the reason. Everyone looked at the cave entrance. Maura could hear faint sounds, probably just the wind, but she was sure there were dangerous monsters inside. She and Gail were shaking. They were getting nervous. Shireena attacked them, asking why they were scared. If they were really adventurous, then they should be loading that mine and doing the search now. If the mine was closed, the city would be forced to continue importing materials from elsewhere. It wasn't sustainable. Gail pointed out the obvious. All the groups that entered the mine never returned. Maura noticed that the previous adventurers who did this search were all killed. The reward for completing the search was only 10 gold coins, which seemed too low for something so dangerous. Shireena explained that the search had begun as a simple for low-level adventurers. That's why the reward hasn't changed. He now understood why no one local wanted to take over. Gail said he couldn't continue the mission unless they had someone strong to fight in the front line. Maura reminded him that he had defeated a mighty sorcerer and his army alone not long ago. But Gail replied that fighting the undead was completely different, especially when they didn't even know what kind of monster they were dealing with. Shireena complained that the people of the city were very soft. She suggested a solution. If they needed someone to take over the party, she could do it herself. That would solve everything. Maura and Gail looked at her by surprise. Shireena didn't understand why they were so confused. She said she already offered to guide them. Gimli, standing nearby, agreed that Shireena had said that, but she pointed out that it was unusual for a client, the person who did the search, to join the party and fight on the front line. She admitted it wasn't a problem. Gail and Maura looked at her, not sure. Wasn't that a problem? Shireena jumped and said everything was settled. She could take very good care of herself. She even flexed her arms to show how strong she was. Maura admitted that Shireena definitely looked strong. Gail still wondered if she was capable of taking on a leading role at a party. Shireena said you were. That was her job now. Maura looked at the group and commented on how unbalanced her party was. They had a curse craftsman, a support wizard, and a blacksmith. It wasn't exactly a traditional adventure team. But even with this weird mix, Maura didn't think they were doomed. They may not know what they were getting themselves into, but with Gale's magical abilities, they can get it. Shireena said it was time to start the search. Maura agreed, saying that they would finish this quickly and then help Gale has his tent in a better part of town. Gale wasn't confident yet. This place didn't look like a dungeon or a crypt. When they entered the mine, Gimli waved to them, wishing them good luck. The group's in. Almost immediately, Gale jumped into a strange sound echoing through the tunnel. He asked what it was. Maura murmured that she knew getting in without a plan was a bad idea. Shireena told them to relax. If there were no monsters around, this mine was basically like her backyard. Gale asked if she was serious. Shireena explained that the miners had dug several ventilation holes. When the wind blew through them, it made a howling sound, like a dog. That's how the place got its name, Doghowl Mine. She pointed out some of the rocks that could mine there and threw a sample at Maura. Maura took it and admired it. Shireena said it was iron, but sometimes they could also find lead or even mithril. She said look around and see the view. This was a high-quality mine. Maura and Gale looked around, impressed. There were a lot of shiny stones on the walls. The whole place looked rich and full of potential. Shireena explained that she had set up her shop nearby because of this mountain. It was a very important place for her. So she asked them to stop acting so nervous. Maura waved and said she understood now. She apologized to Shireena. After all, it wasn't a scary tome. There were no undead around. There's nothing to be afraid of. So she ran into something. Confused, Maura turned to see what it was and went face to face with something weird, a face. She screamed and screamed that something was there. A living creature. Shireena didn't believe me. She looked around and said she didn't see anything, no monster in sight. Gale got excited and asked where the undead were. Shireena was confused by your reaction. Why was he so excited? Gale explained that if there was an undead person here, it could be very special. So everyone turned to take a closer look at what Maura had seen. It wasn't a living creature. It was just a statue. Shireena noted that it was incredibly detailed. The stonework was so good, it almost looked like the figure was alive. Shireena was impressed by the statue. She called Gale to see. And he was surprised. He admired craftsmanship, saying it was a real work of art. Liv turned their eyes on both of them, thinking they were acting like work-obsessed nerds. Shireena wondered what kind of skilled artist might have done something like that. When Maura turned to explore more, she came across another door. When she opened it, she was shocked by what she saw inside. She called the others urgently, but Shireena and Gale were still very focused on admiring the statue. Gale mentioned he didn't see that kind of art many times, not to waste any more time. Maura took them both and dragged them to see what she had found. When Shireena looked inside the room, she was stunned. The whole space was full of statues, dozens of them. They weren't random forms either. They looked like real frozen people in place. Shireena pointed out how strange it was, and Gale noticed that each statue looked different, as if they were individuals. He immediately realized that something was very wrong. That wasn't just weird, that was dangerous. She suspected they were in serious trouble. Shireena approached to examine one of the statues. She was shocked. She recognized the face of one of the figures. Gale and Maura asked what she meant. Shireena confirmed she wasn't guessing. She really knew some of these people. She recognized several of the statues. They were adventurers from the nearby town of Farmage. The people who had disappeared were right here, turned to stone. The group realized with horror that they were not sculptures. They were real people who were petrified. That's why their details were so realistic. It was cold. Shireena couldn't believe it. What could do something like that? Gale had an answer. It had to be a monster. Everyone understands the danger now. Maura quickly took command and ordered everyone to remain alert. She decided to watch the exit and told Gale and Shireena to cover the front and side paths. Gale was very uncomfortable. There were only a few monsters known to turn living people into stone. They were all extremely dangerous, classified as or higher. He and Maura discussed the possibilities. It may have been a basilisk or a gorgon, but then something didn't fit. There was no smell of chicken coop, but there were great feathers scattered, and petrification was definitely magical. So it hit Gale. It wasn't just any monster, it was a rooster. As soon as he realized it, a strange sound echoed through the cave. A big boom followed, and then the monster appeared. It was a terrifying creature, part chicken, part snake. This was a cockatrice, an animal considered a disaster class in many regions. Your body can deflect arrows and other projectiles. It had sharp claws, poisonous attacks, and a deadly breath that could turn people into stone. Worse, it was quick and smart, able to fight with strategy, not just brute force. Maura realized it too late. They were being attacked from behind. His formation had been broken. The monster had passed them and was now coming from behind. Their front and rear positions were reversed, and they were vulnerable. Gale saw that Maura was in danger and yelled at her to come back. Without hesitation, he ran to protect her. As he advanced, he was face to face with the rooster. Gale jumped on the cock, holding sharp darts. The snake half the creature shot him from behind. Gale quickly jumped back and threw a dart. That exploded in contact and pierced the body of the rooster. The explosion stunned her for a moment. He had opened his beak, trying to peck Gale, which made him an easy target for his attack. Shireena was surprised that Gale's dart got through the monster's hard skin. She was also shocked that the creature's natural resistance to paralysis was not working. Normally, such a powerful creature would be immune. This cockatrice was on the level of a dungeon chief. But Gale made it clear that none of it mattered now. They had to attack while vulnerable. He explained that the dart he used was a unique weapon, with a curse that stunned and temporarily removed the armor. It wouldn't last long. Shireena agreed and ran with her huge hammer. She carried the cockatrice and achieved a series of powerful attacks in the air. Maura told me the hits. Shireena had struck 5 consecutive blows. Gale was amazed how Shireena crushed the monster's head. He flew off impact. Shireena celebrated briefly, thinking it was over, but it's not over. Cockatrice's snake tail suddenly rose from below and opened its jaws. Before he could bite, Maura cast a spell. Magic energy around Shireena, strengthening her muscles. The spell was designed to act quickly, giving her a quick boost in power, although it didn't last long. Shireena was fine with it. She stuck her hammer vertically between the snake's jaws to force them to separate them, then reached in. With all her strength, she pulled the snake's jaw and tore it down, dividing the snake from mouth to body into a brutal movement. She laughed, satisfied with victory. Maura pointed out how close it had been. You're lucky the cockatrice was moving slower than usual, thanks to Gale's damn dart still working. But she couldn't stop asking again what was with Gale and her strange curses. Shireena agreed. It didn't make sense that a single-use curse worked so well on such a powerful monster. Gale explained that it was very simple. He had made the dart using a talisman made from the ashes of a ghost monster from the capital. The ghost had a skill that let him through the walls, and he used that property to add a 0 armor effect to his dart, along with a stunning ability. Maura was completely confused. Shireena asked why going through the walls would equal 0 armor, and what kind of ghost lived in the capital. Gale tried to describe him. He said it looked like a skeleton on a black cape. It made the girls stop. Maura asked if you had a sickle. Shireena added maybe an old scary flashlight too. Gale's eyes glowed. It was exactly that, a huge skeleton with these things. He casually mentioned how he had seen it coming through walls and crypts. That's when the girls lost. They said he was a Dark Reaper, a disaster-class monster. He was a legendary being known as the Soul Reaper, a literal demigod. They didn't believe it. Gale casually faced something like this. Gale said it was no big deal. He dispelled him and turned him into cursed equipment. Maura looked at him in shock. She couldn't believe he'd fought a demigod and used his remains to create weapons. That explains how your dart worked as well against a boss monster as the rooster. Shireena looked at Gale unbelieving, wondering who he really was. Gale just reminded her to be more careful next time. In a serious tone, he said that even a careless moment in battle could cost someone's life. That was something every adventurer on dangerous missions had to understand. Shireena admitted she was very close to dying in the last fight. Anyone would have let their guard down at a time like this. but she was determined it wouldn't happen again. Like she said, he suddenly realized something. She turned to look back at the cock's body. With the monster defeated, Gail noticed that the doggo mine was safe again. This meant that the dangerous pursuit of A was now complete. Everyone was excited about success. Gail didn't waste any time and rushed to collect feathers from the fallen cockatrice. They planned to let Gimli know about the rescued adventurers, but for now, the mine was clean and could be used again. Shireena agreed. The danger is definitely gone. It wasn't an easy fight, but it was obvious that the cockatrice was the monster causing trouble. Now that has down, the mine's safe. She looked at herself and realized that after all, she became an adventurer too. Gail exhaled, worn out, but satisfied. This was the first time he had seen a cockatrice as part of a mission. He wanted to know if any of it was edible. Maura didn't know, and honestly, she didn't care. She was more focused on getting evidence to complete the mission. She was surprised Gail wanted to eat it, considering it was full of poison. Gail was a little shocked to be poisonous. It looked a lot like a giant chicken. Maura agreed, but she was also curious why a creature like this would hide in a mine. She asked Gail where to open it. It made Gail think. Maura was right. This mine was small for a monster that size. Maybe he was using the place like a giant birdhouse. It was hard to say what monsters were thinking. Gail smelled the air and realized it smelled like chicken coops, like old excrement or rotten eggs. So he heard a knock. He asked Maura if she'd stepped on something. She had. And she looked down to find something strange under her foot. It was a broken eggshell. Gail leaned over to look. It was too big to be a normal egg, so he thought about chicken coops and what they were used for. Maura remembered there were Hensley eggs. That's when Shireena realized something horrible. They weren't just in a random hiding place. This was the nest of the cockatrice. A loud noise filled the air. Then it got louder. Out of the shadows, a great girl emerged. Part bird, part snake, just like your parents. But he wasn't alone. More of them were coming. A whole bunch of roosters were headed for them. Maura was horrified, realizing this place was the monster's nest. Shireena and Maura screamed for Gail to escape, but he hesitated. He wanted to know if this was like one of those cases where baby animals print themselves in the first thing they see, and then they follow. Maybe they weren't attacking. Maybe they just saw him as a father. Maura didn't believe that for a second. These little monsters seemed to want to eat it. She grabbed him and dragged him away as soon as the baby's cocks ran after them. Shireena screamed for everyone to run as fast as possible. If these things caught them, she would be held responsible for what happened. The three of them ran away with a bunch of sharp, snake-tailed girls chasing them through the mine tunnels. Maura realized the tunnel ended up in a dead end. I had nowhere else to go. Shireena discovered that this part of the mine must have been closed some time ago, probably blocked. Gail was nervous and asked what they should do now. Shireena knew they only had one choice. She took the lead and fought her enemies while the others stood behind her and kept her safe. The baby's cockatrices were approaching quickly, and there wasn't much time. Shireena shook her hammer with full force and hit one of the girls, knocking him down. She hit someone else with a bad accident. His hammer was strong enough to crush solid rock. But looking at the group of girls running towards them, she noticed something. The attacks didn't bother them. They kept coming. Even after seeing their brothers crushed, the others did not retreat. Maura asked if Shireena could keep fighting a little longer. Shireena said she could handle it for now, but Maura was starting to get very worried. These baby cockatrices may be young, but they were already bigger than a normal person. And there were at least 100 of them. It didn't even make sense. How can a bird lay so many eggs? Then she remembered. Cockatrices weren't just birds. They were part snake too, and snakes were known to have many descendants at the same time. That might explain it, but that wasn't even the worst part. Those cubs were already as aggressive as their mother, and they were clearly hungry. If they were fighting adult monsters, maybe taking down some would scare the rest. But these babies didn't care. They had no fear or hesitation. They just wanted to eat whatever was in front of them. Shireena kept counting while fighting. 1 down, 2, 3, 4. She was getting frustrated. They kept coming. She even joked about it, asking them to stop, but knowing they wouldn't. Maura finally finished the spell. It activated a powerful magical combination that flooded Shireena with energy, unlike the previous muscle impulse spell that faded rapidly. This would get stronger the more magical power she spilled on her. Shireena could feel the difference right away. Your blows have become much more powerful. Now she can take down a baby with a single blow. Maura added an increase in speed, then more fans followed, increasing Shireena's strength, defense, and agility. Shireena felt like an army of one woman. His hammer generated like a tornado, crushing anything approaching. With Maura's magic supporting her, she was a blur of movement, quick, strong, and almost untouchable. But the girls kept coming. There were so many. Shireena was starting to get tired, his body hurt, and his mind was overloaded. She admitted she couldn't go on like this for long. Not physically, not mentally. Maura was also exhausted and desperate. She turned to Gail, asking if he had anything to use, some kind of curse, as he used before in those orcs. But Gail shook his head. Had be done with those special tools a long time ago. Besides, those tricks wouldn't work here. Baby cockatrices were very different. They weren't orcs. They didn't have minds or spirits strong enough to curse them. Shireena doesn't understand. So Gail explained it like this. A curse is like showing someone a lemon to make water in their mouths. It's up to them to know what a lemon is. But these girls were too young. They did not understand fear, pain, or illusion. Spirit-based curses only worked with monsters smart enough to feel fear or be deceived. That meant that all of Gail's methods were useless here. Unlike previous fights, your magic wouldn't help at all. Baby noises were getting louder and louder. Shireena stood in front of the group, completely worn out from the fight. Maura, looking worried, asked Gail if she could use something on herself. Something that could help them now, even if it wasn't for the enemy. Gail dug his tool bag. Most of what he found there were strange things he had done himself. Things he did originally just for decoration, not for battle. There was a cursed bandana, a scary dark mask, and a pair of horns called lamentation horns. Gail was proud of his projects, but they should not be used seriously. Shireena, hearing all this, thought they were doomed. But Gail casually mentioned that the equipment had some effects, such as triple defense, double agility, and resistance to fatigue and poison. Shireena's eyes glowed. It was exactly the kind of help they needed right now. Lives quickly created a magical barrier to hold the babies for a few more moments. Meanwhile, Shireena pushed Gail away and took his items. Gail warned her not to wait too long. The equipment wasn't combat. While Shireena was holding the bandana, she noticed her disgusting, rugged texture. It looked like he had fur pores. Disgusting, but desperate, she convinced herself to use it anyway. As soon as she did, the bandana's magic began. His body looked like all the exhaustion had just melted. Gail then gave her the mask of darkness, which could cancel the poison and help her see in the darkness. She looked around the mine and was shocked. There were even more baby cocks hidden in the shadows. Maura was clearly disgusted by the strange mask, but she warned that the barrier would not last long. They needed to hurry. Then came the last piece of equipment, the horns of lamentation. According to Gail, they doubled their agility and gave him 5 times the normal arm strength. Shireena was shocked by that number. But the moment she dressed them, she felt the insane power flowing through her hands and fingers. The barrier's broken. The girls broke in and carried it. Maura shouted a warning. One was already after Shireena, but Shireena turned and, with her now super-powerful hammer crushed in a single stroke. The strike shook the whole mind. Even if Maura's support magic passed, Shireena was stronger than ever. Shireena couldn't believe what she was experiencing. She felt invincible. Stirred by power, she came to a new special move, Eternal Smash, and swung her hammer wildly, laughing like a maniac. Maura was worried that something was wrong. She asked Gail if the equipment was messing with Shireena's mind. But Gail explained that what was happening was not a side effect. It was the result of combining the powers of all cursed equipment at the same time. When certain cursed equipment is used together, they create a reaction, such as mixing chemicals, and this reaction can make the effects more intense. In this case, the horns of lamentation and dark mask were totally compatible. which meant that Shireena was feeling the full strength of all that power at the same time. Maura compared it to a high corridor where someone tries so hard that their brain floods with good chemicals. Finally, after crushing the last baby of roosters, Shireena struck the hammer one last time. His blood flowed from him, and his face glowed with adrenaline and excitement. Gail took a step forward and quickly dissipated all the cursed equipment she was using. Shireena breathed deep and groaned for relief. The cursed objects were finally off. She said that if she had gone back to their town, covered in scary equipment, she would have been super embarrassed. Gail was confused. Just moments ago, she was praising all that equipment. Shireena made it clear. She liked the equipment, not what it looked like. Gail, checking the equipment, sighed. The items were very worn out now. Shireena provoked him, saying that since she used them, their value has probably gone up. People would pay dearly for the equipment used by someone as handsome as her. Then suddenly her balance gave in. She fainted on the floor, confused and in pain. Her whole body was throbbing. She doesn't understand. She thought the equipment had cured her fatigue. Gail explained the truth. The equipment didn't erase her tiredness. It just made her body feel good. Now that the equipment was off, the total cost of everything she did hit her at once. She fought a whole swarm of giant baby monsters with 5 times her normal strength and doubled her speed. That's why her body was screaming. And it wasn't just fatigue. While the equipment had protected her from poison earlier, that protection had now disappeared. Any poison that entered her wounds would begin to spread as normal. Shireena groaned in disbelief. Maura thought to herself it made sense. Few people were crazy enough to use cursed equipment, and most people thought the curse was useless work. But if equipment like this can knock down both an adult cockatrice and dozens of their babies, then it was really incredibly valuable, even if Gail hasn't noticed. Maura scolded Gail for not warning them anymore, but he said the pain would go away soon. Shireena just needed to rest. Shireena stretched out on the floor, completely done. Maura asked what happened to your big talk about being ashamed. Shireena replied that she no longer had the strength to care. Maura agreed. His own magical power was completely used. It would take her a while to recover. Gail admitted he spent a lot of his resources too. So Shireena said, this time they were sure. The danger was over. Maura looked around and agreed. They had done it. Dogal was safe again, and the dangerous class search was finally complete. But she admitted that if she knew this place was a rooster's nest, she'd never get near it. Gail felt the same way. If he could have predicted such chaos, he would have stayed in his tent and sold his goods in peace. Shireena laughed along with them. If she knew what you were getting into, she wouldn't have agreed to join this mission. But when they started relaxing, something hit Gail. Something was still wrong. He remembered that strange feeling he had before, the weird vibe he had when he saw that giant shell. He realized there was something else. Something worse. So heavy steps echoed through the mine. The floor shook. Something big was coming. It was a rooster, but not just any rooster. That was huge. Even bigger than the first rooster. I was stepping towards them. Your eyes are closed on the intruders. Gail suddenly understood what was happening. The rooster they had already defeated must have been the chicken, and now, this, the huge rooster, was the companion. That meant they hadn't just cleaned a nest. They destroyed your house and killed your babies. No wonder this creature was furious. Shireena looked at disbelief. This rooster was much bigger than the first. And now, he was attacking them. The battle wasn't over. That was the 3rd round. As alive, he couldn't believe it. After all you've been through. Now this. Shireena pressed the hammer. She was mad, too. Exhausted, but not willing to back down. She reminded the others that just because they were tired doesn't mean the enemy would go easy on them. The walls of the mine trembled under the strength of the rooster's steps. Pieces of rock have collapsed. Shireena realized something. The rooster had just returned to the nest, probably bringing food to her cubs, just to find the destroyed nest and the dead cubs. That would make anyone mad. The rooster released a loud crow and a code. Shireena looked at him. She didn't care about anger. This mine was guild territory, not a chicken nest. I had no right to take over their space. Suddenly, the rooster lifted its head and released a strange cloud of smoke. Jill saw it and froze. Something about that mist triggered every alarm in your brain. Bad feeling hit him like a punch. He ran forward, realizing what was about to happen. He yelled at Shireena to move. Just in time, he managed to take her down. The fog has passed over them. Everything he touched, stones, earth, and old tools, they cracked and became solid stone. Jill just recognized it. He heard rumors, but he never saw him in real life. This was the petrifying breath of a rooster. That's how all the other adventurers failed. That movement alone could end the entire parties if they weren't ready. And then it happened again. The rooster blew a second wave of that deadly fog. The group shuffled to get away from him. Lives, watching everything, noticed something. The rooster's breath didn't go very far. It had a short range. And there seemed to be a delay between each explosion, as if the creature had to recharge. But the bad news is they were stuck in a dead end. They were inside a mine, and there wasn't much room to move. They couldn't just run away. While Shireena and Gail were trying to distract the massive creature and avoid its attacks, Maura knew she had to come up with a plan quickly. Then she saw them running towards her at full speed. They made a sharp turn and were coming back towards her. She prepared for what came after. Maura was surprised that the monster rooster chased them as far as they were. Gail kind of waited, so he wasn't too shocked. Behind the rooster, a huge snake tried to reach them. Suddenly, something hit them, and they were all thrown back into the ground. The rooster then closed his eyes. The three looked at him, realizing that they had no more stones to hide. They needed a shield, but there wasn't one in sight. Shireena's hammer had been blown up, and the nearby mine car had been completely crushed. Shireena said she had a shield. Gail and Maura didn't understand what she meant. So, Shireena opened her arms and told them to hide behind her. She reminded them that she said she was going to fight ahead while they supported her. Now it was their turn to stand up, but then Gail noticed that Shireena was beginning to turn to stone. He tried to get her. A cracking sound echoed around them. Gail was shocked. Shireena smiled. Even if it turned to stone, I couldn't let Gail get hurt. She said to use it as a shield, get Maura out and survive. She said she wanted everyone to be together. Before turning to stone, she asked Gail for one last favor. Take care of everyone in the guild for her, especially Gimli, who was doing a great job as an elf. She never said that before. Suddenly Gail screamed at her for a second. Something happened. He used a magic spell. A bright light shone around them. Shireena's stone body slowly returned to normal. She looked at her hands, totally confused. Gail explained that when he touched her during the petrification, he had a feeling he might break the curse. So he tried, and luckily the spell worked. Maura and Shireena were too shocked to say anything. Gail explained that he thought the rooster's breath was poison, but it worked more like a gorgon's curse. A gorgon is a female monster with snakes for hair. If you look into her eyes, you will be cursed and turned to stone. Gail realized that perhaps his magic could be used against more types of monsters than he thought, even animals like the rooster. Shireena pointed to the cock monster. He looked exhausted with his red calmed down. Your petrifying breath must have taken a lot from him. Maura pointed out that now that Gail could undo the petrification, the greatest threat of the cockatrice was useless. The situation had turned completely in their favor. Maura had enough magic to do one last spell, so she used it to increase Shireena's strength. Shireena prepared to fight. Maura told her to hold the snake while Gail attacked the rooster. Everyone moved quickly. The snake whistled and attacked, but Shireena ran right into her mouth and held her as she was told. Meanwhile, Gail was in a position to go after the rooster. Shireena said the surprise attack plan was clever and that the rooster never expected his best weapon to be useless now. Gail ran from behind. Shireena told him not to hold anything. He approached the rooster and got ready. He cast every curse he had: poison, petrification, confusion, zero armor, blood drainage, pain binding, and I hoped at least one of them would work. He called it a curse sail. Like the magic coop, Maura ran to Shireena. Gail jumped. Just before a big explosion exploded, he said the rooster could keep the change, playing about the massive attack. Tons of skulls burst and buried the cockatrice. The whole area was full of them. Maura asked if Gail had used every curse spell. Gail said yes. He had no idea which ones would work on a chief monster, so he used them all. Then, through the pile of skulls, a bright light began to shine. Maura was frustrated. She thought Gail had gone too far by casting all her curse spells. If he kept doing things like that, shed play, the whole world could fall apart. Gail thought his reaction was funny and laughed, saying he was overreacting. But then rays of light began to shine from underneath the pile of skulls left from the attack. Shireena was alarmed. She remembered to tell Gail not to hold back, but now she realized it had gone too far. A bright flash in front of them, and then a massive explosion went through the area. The explosion was so strong that all three of them were thrown into the air. Shireena screamed out of frustration. Blood flowed all over the exploding cockatrice, absorbing them all. His guts were all over the floor. Everything was a mess. Shireena called Maura to make sure she was okay. Maura replied that she was only close. She felt filthy, covered in blood and dirt. Her cape was ruined, and she knew it would be impossible to clean. She asked where Gail was. Shireena pointed to where he had landed, scattered on the ground. Suddenly, the ground started shaking. Gail blinked and looked around, realizing that the place was starting to collapse. Rocks were falling. The girls confirmed his fear and blamed him for it. The three of them ran out to the entrance. As they ran, the cave began to collapse. They passed the room with the stone statues and continued. Larger rocks were falling now, some even covering the entrance. But just in time they managed to get out of the collapsing mine. Once outside, Maura and Gail fell to the ground, breathing hard, relieved they were alive. But it didn't last long. Suddenly, they both hit their heads. Shireena was on top of them, furious. She couldn't believe what had happened. They should eliminate monsters, not destroy the whole mine. She scolded them, asking who ordered a mountain down. Gail tried to defend his actions. He said he should still tell you how to complete the search. After all, they defeated all the monsters. Maura agreed. She thought they owed a reward now. Shireena was trembling with rage. A reward, she said they should pay. She reminded them how to protect them from the cock's breath and how she lost her hammer. The mine was destroyed, and she had no idea how to explain it to anyone. Gail tried to make a deal. He reminded her of the place he wanted at the Merchant Association. She promised to help you with that. After everything you've been through, it didn't seem right for her to give up now. But Shireena reminded him that she had taken the biggest risks. She was right in the blast zone, protecting them. She yelled at them to stop talking. She started talking again. What was she going to tell the merchants? Here's the guy who blew up the local mine with his curses. It was ridiculous. She was in full armor, lost her hammer, and the whole place was a disaster. She said it was the worst day of her life. Gail shrunk, teasing her again. But Shireena yelled at him to shut up. Then, by far, a hand rose from the ground. Someone crawled out of the rubble, coughing. She said she didn't think she was going to make it. She was following Gail from afar, curious about the strange items he made. But she admitted that what she saw today was much more than she could have predicted. She hoped to watch him safe from the shadows. But when Gail destroyed the entire mine, she realized there was no way to avoid that kind of power. Still, she admitted something important. His cursed items weren't just random tools. Each was powerful enough to be considered an artifact. After seeing it with her own eyes, she understood what Gail really was. Later, they went back to the mine. Gail went to the statue of a man, the first one they saw when they entered the place. He started singing his dissipating magic. The stone began to crack and break. Slowly, petrification rose and man was free again. Charlie was surprised to see you. He was gone and very worried. But somehow, thanks to the adventurers, she had been found and brought back. Penelope held him tightly, weeping in relief and joy. Shireena watched aside, lifting her eyebrows and making a sarcastic comment about how intense their meeting was. Almost like it was hotter than the forge she was working on. Maura reminded everyone that her work had not yet finished. They still had to restore the rest of the mine and rescue the other people who had been turned to stone. Charlie thanked the group, overwhelmed with emotion. He said if he and Penelope survived alive, he had promised to marry her. Now it seemed like that promise could come true. Gail went into his pocket and pulled something. He offered the couple as a gift, no refund needed. They looked at him, surprised and insecure with what to say. He simply asked if they could stop at his merchant tent someday. Before he could say more, Shireena jumped in, scolding him for giving cursed items as gifts during emotional moments like this. Maura added that whether he was free or not mattered. These items have always had strange effects. Despite his reactions, Charlie and Penelope did not seem disturbed. In fact, they kept smiling, hugging each other. Back at Traveler's Guild, Gimli was moved by a reception when the door opened until she saw it was just Shireena. Her face immediately fell from disappointment. Shireena noticed the reaction and sat at the reception, commenting on how the place was always empty. Gimli, clearly angry, asked if Shireena came to fight again, but Shireena smiled, saying if Gimli wanted one, she should say so. Gimli took a dart from the counter and asked what the foreign object was. Shireena said to inspect. When Gimli looked closer, she was stunned. It wasn't just any weapon, it was an artifact. Shireena waved consciously. It was real, no doubt. At first, Gimli thought it was some kind of joke, but now she realized it wasn't. Shireena explained that Gail had succeeded. He was giving things like this, like it was nothing, like he was making a sale. She didn't understand what was going on with him. Gimli smiled and shared what he heard. That Gail was a wandering adventurer from the capital, possibly once part of a high-level party. Shireena just looked at her, stunned. She stuck her teeth in disbelief, wondering aloud why someone like that would wander into a small, sleepy town like theirs. Then she changed the subject, saying that all the adventurers who had been turned into stone in the mine by the cockatrice were now restored. Even the priests gave up trying to cure that curse, but Gail did. Gimli asked about the curse, and Shireena explained more. Even she was petrified with the rooster breath. But here she was, alive and well. As the mine reopened, they found more stone statues of adventurers inside. Unfortunately, some did not survive. The cockatrice had already eaten partially. But those, Gail was recovering in the church infirmary. Because of that, the local church was panicking. They didn't know what to do with Gail's powers. Shireena said she tried to calm things down for now, but she had to admit that Gail's ability to remove curses was off limits. Gimli got more curious. She asked Shireena about destabilization skills, and Shireena told her how wild they really were. Gail discovered that the petrification of the rooster was some kind of curse, not poison. Once he realized this, he cured the whole group. No remedy or help from the necessary church. Shireena rubbed her head. So you asked Gimli if she still seriously believed Gail was just a random wanderer. Gimli laughed. Wandering or not, Gail was still a new member of the guild. But after saving all those adventurers and helping with some long-term missions, she admitted she might need to ask for a promotion on his behalf, even if he was working alone. Shireena provoked her for being sneaky. As usual, Gimli replied with a sly smile, saying he didn't need advice from a fox like Shireena. So she came back to the question, what was Shireena doing for Gail? Shireena thought for a moment before admitting that she had let him join the Smith Association. She said her sense of design was questionable, but her skills were real. Gimli completely agreed. And that was good. There were no rules that would stop anyone from being in more than one alliance at the same time. Both smiled a little bit at each other, so they quickly turned away. Shireena suddenly got up and said she had to leave. Gimli said he wasn't fooling anyone. Shireena told her to be quiet. Meanwhile, in the mine, Gail sneezed high. He lives nearby, scolded him for not walking away first. Gail apologized, saying the mine was still dusty. He added that Shireena was being very hard on her workers. But if it evened them up, maybe it was worth it. Maura said he was very optimistic. She pointed out that everything that happened now was because of all the curses Gail launched at once. She said she didn't even know if he was a heroic adventurer, saving lives, or a disaster waiting to happen while she was playing with his cheeks. Not far away, the miners were busy again, filling carts with rocks. The mine was back in operation. Maura then asked if it was true that Gail joined the Smith Association. He confirmed and showed both plates. One for the Smiths Association and one for the Adventurers Association. Shireena helped him with his market in exchange for his entry. Maura was surprised. The Smith Association was known to be full of serious craftsmen. Rarely do they let any adventurer join, and they usually hire outside help for mining. She asked what Gail was doing for them. Gail said they didn't make him do anything. They had given him a corner of the guild to make his cursed equipment. Maura raised her eyebrows and wondered if that meant they accepted him as one of them. Gail started thinking about Shireena. No matter what he created, she always had something negative to say about it. I was starting to get nervous. She didn't like him making cursed swords and dangerous artifacts. Gail assumed he wanted something more practical, maybe even decorative items. With that in mind, he started working on those things. He showed one of his new creations to Maura. It was a vase made from a bleached skull upside down, with flowers coming out of it. Maura was totally disgusted. To her, it seemed like something no one should carry in public. Gail insisted it wasn't a random idea. It took him a whole day to finish. Not because turning a skull upside down was difficult, but because he spent hours polishing it and making sure the colors had a nice glow. Maura told him not to polish someone's skull like that, and guessed he probably added some kind of crazy effect to it. Gail claimed it had no wild effect. He was focused on design this time. Still, if someone put the vase in a room, it would automatically give you constant magical recovery. And if they used it as a glass, it would even allow for a quick cure. Maura was stunned. That kind of item was something mages would desperately want. The survival of a wizard often depends on how quickly they can regain their magical power. Usually, they have to use potions that I like terrible or meditate in the dark for long hours to regain their energy. But with Gail's vase, all they had to do was keep him close. Gail didn't think it was that important. After all, anyone can get their magic back by resting, right? But Maura shook her head in frustration. Magic recovery wasn't that easy. Like physical strength, it depended on a person's diet, sleep, and even how much alcohol or sweets they consumed. It could decrease if they got sick or if the body wasn't in good condition. That's why magicians were usually very strict with their lifestyle. The idea that something as simple as a vase could replace all this effort seemed almost unfair. Maura wondered what it would be like to put that scary vase in her room. She realized she'd never make it. No wonder Shireena was always scolding Gail. Soon after, Shireena appeared, clearly angry. She warned them not to be so noisy or risk another collapse. When she asked what was going on, Gail explained that Maura was upset after seeing her last creation. Shireena took a look at the skull vessel and immediately told Gail that she'd kick him out of town if he tried to sell that thing. Gail reminded her that she told him to go crazy with his ideas. But Shireena replied that she never told him to do scary things like that. What she wanted were useful tools that everyone could benefit from. To change the subject, Shireena gave him something big. It was the head of the rooster they defeated. She told Gail to take him to Gimlis because she would pay for it. They had dug up the body too, so it was a good time to make money off the materials. Gail asked if she was sure, since she was the one who knocked out most of the monsters. But Shireena admitted she only won the first and all the smallest. The big final cockatrice, that was all Gail. She told him to split the payment with Maura. Gail stopped for a moment, caught off guard by the gesture. Shireena laughed and provoked him not to start feeling something for her now. So Gail remembered something. He had not yet received any reward from Shireena for everything he did. Shireena emptied, saying a simple thank you should be enough. But Gail reminded her that he only accepted the mission because she promised to help him set up a market. Shireena admitted she wasn't trying to escape, but explained that they were busy trying to rebuild the mine after the chaos that happened there. Once it was all over, Gail was told he could name anything he wanted. A market stall, a rental space, even a building full of shops. Gail immediately said he wanted a real building. He seemed a little greedy, but before going any further, Shireena said there was something she wanted to show him. In front of them was a big cart with a heavy cape. When Gail looked down, he saw the organ that produced the cock's petrifying breath. The same thing inside the monster that created the mist turning into rocks. Shireena remembered that he had said it himself. This breath was like a curse, similar to the deadly gaze of a gorgon. Since he was able to reverse the petrification effect on both adventurers and Shireena, he believed he proved it was actually based on a curse. Shireena confirmed it was his now. She thought he'd like something like this, and suggested he wanted to do some items using it. Gail hesitated, thinking the organ could sell for a lot of money. But Shireena insisted he can have it. However, there was a prank. She mentioned giving it away for free might not be the best idea. She was planning on teaching him a lesson in supply and demand. Meanwhile, away from the town of Farmage, news of Gail's strange and powerful cursed equipment was spreading, so much so that even the capital had noticed. Right under the imperial palace, in the dark vaults under the emperor's throne, a voice sounded in disbelief about what they had learned. A young woman kneeled on the floor, confirming that it was true. Someone out there created an artifact. But the prince before her, Prince Firiel, was furious. He wasn't interested in excuses. Holding the young lady Lisnette by the jaw, he made it clear he didn't believe her. After all, she was only the leader of the Empire's assassins, while he was the crown prince. He pulled her by her hair, dragging her through the room while he scolded her. After all the promises she made and all the confidence she had shown on her team, the operation failed. That, he said, is what he got for trusting her killer group. He stopped in front of a trunk. An ancient and cursed treasure box. It was called the Heart of the Devil. Inside was something terrible, the core remains of a demon king who once terrorized the world. Even when you were close, you released some horrible energy. Lisnette shook with the poisonous aura leaking from her. The prince explained that this artifact could suck the life out of anyone, and now it seemed to enjoy feeding on people like her, weak and useless. He pushed her face into her chest and asked if she knew why she had been called into that secret chamber. She didn't do it. She begged him to stop. He laughed, pointing out how no one would ever gladly enter a goddamn safe like this, making it the perfect place for a private conversation. He whispered that the cursed object inside could kill an ordinary warrior with just one touch. Lisnette begged for his life again. Finally, the prince closed the box and released it, leaving it dented on the floor. But he still demanded an explanation. Everything in detail. Lisnette told him what happened. The mission had gone well at first, his spies had paved the way, and the elite assassins had been sent. But everything fell apart during the final stage. Their target, Princess Cara, had something on her, an artifact Lisnette had described before. Every murder technique used against her failed. The attacks came out as if she had some kind of defense. The prince was stunned. Was Lisnette really suggesting that this defenseless princess managed to survive every attack? He couldn't believe it. But Lisnette insisted it was true. Cara had resistance to the effects of instant death, and the artifact she carried gave her several other defensive abilities as well. It was a strange reality, but the only explanation that made sense after losing so many killers. This revelation implied a much bigger problem. The prince realized that this meant that the artifact was new, unknown, and possibly part of the growing power of the kingdom. In the world of politics and war, artifacts were more than just powerful objects. They were tools that could reduce the balance of power between nations. Knowing where each artifact was and who controlled it was essential. Somehow this one escaped from the Empire's intelligence networks. That was bad, very bad, and this can't be the only one. Lisnette confirmed that. No, there was more. The prince cursed the situation. The kingdom had him on edge, and now this. Worse still, it seemed that his rival, his own younger half-brother, Cardes, was planning to marry Princess Cara. Viriel hated the idea. If Cardes had that kind of power, he could change everything. Viriel, the first and most powerful prince, would be overshadowed. He couldn't let that happen. He murmured a curse on Cara. Where had she found these artifacts? Lisnette then added something else. They recently discovered a new lead. This particular artifact was apparently obtained from a young man, someone who ran a store, a simple market. In a corner of a busy tavern in the capital, the kind of place where adventurers like to meet, someone screamed unbelieving that Gail was in Farmage. It seemed unbelievable that he would have the courage to go this far. One of the others warned him to keep his voice down, pointing out that people could hear and act based on information. They kept the conversation quiet. The rumor you heard came from the coachman outside the city gates. Someone guessed that maybe Gail got on a stage. One of them called the waitress, pissed off at how slow the drinks were. She came to the table, and he demanded more beer, this time for the barrel. Poor waitress apologized and ran to get it. Someone at the table said maybe it was time he stopped drinking. Another changed the subject back to history. Apparently, there was a stagecoach going to Farmage that had been attacked by a bunch of orcs. According to the rumor, Gail had killed them all. Looks like he had help from someone skilled. It seemed impossible for one of them. If Gail, a guy known to back up, could defeat orcs, then why still have a front line or back line at a party? But they said to let the story end. The story was that Gail used a strange and ugly dagger to eliminate the orcs, probably a cursed weapon. That definitely sounded like Gail's kind of thing. Still, the man couldn't believe it. Orcs were tough even for them. There was no way Gail could do it. It had to be someone else. Others on the table arrived in more detail. Someone had seen Gail, or at least someone like him, running a tent. He was selling cursed items at very low prices on the foreign market, and for some strange reason, the royal guards ended up confiscating everything he was selling. That made everybody laugh. Sure, Gail's stuff would be trash or cursed in a way that would scare people. Still, apparently he made some decent money out of it. More people added to the story. Gail had been seen staying at a good inn and wearing new clothes, away from her usual scrappy me. That meant he had enough money to pay for his stage trip, at least. And if the royal guard was looking for him and still couldn't find him, maybe had really escaped. If all the rumors were true, it seemed that Gail had taken his winnings and moved from the capital. Knowing how stubbornly hopeful he could be, he probably thought he could open a shop of cursed goods somewhere. He was always obsessed with doing weird, scary things, and now he had enough stock to start a business. Everyone at the table started agreeing. Someone else confirmed that someone who looks like Gail even filled out paperwork with the Merchant Association to open a market bank. When she asked about it and showed her the mission contract she received from Princess Cara, the guild leader gave in, despite murmuring about privacy, and told her that the man had not been seen recently, so Gail probably moved on. The group thought it all made sense. Gail tested in a tent, gained experience, and then moved his damn item business elsewhere. If anyone liked your strange creations or not, Gail would open a cursed store if he had money for it. When one of them looked down and realized that his mug was empty, he complained again about how slow the service was and shouted for his beer, saying that everything was being paid for by Princess Cara. Then, without warning, a great shadow appeared beside them. It was the waitress. She carried 2 huge barrels, one in each hand. As soon as the man was about to complain again, ready to say he wanted to drink as much as he could tonight, he turned and saw her standing there. The waitress threw the barrels at the table with a heavy beat, clearly sarcastic while she thanked Kush for waiting. Kush wasn't happy about it, complaining about how customers should be treated better, but she just pointed out that these were the barrels he asked for. Norris noticed how strong the waitress must be. Only one of those barrels would be super heavy. The group quickly returned to the main discussion, trying to find out where Gail might be hiding. What they didn't realize was that the waitress was secretly listening to them. Another server whispered to her, praising her good work. She wasn't just a waitress, she was Lady Lisnette. Lisnette already knew this group was being watched. Your job now was to gather information. Still, she couldn't help feeling angry. Why, of all places, did she have to take a part-time job in such a miserable tavern in the kingdom? Her spy agreed it was frustrating, but asked if they were sure this was the right group to follow. Lisnette replied that it almost certainly was. Based on information, these people were as bad and grumpy as expected. What bothered Lisnette most was that Princess Cara chose to hire them. The conversation you heard confirmed it. They were talking about Farmage, and the name Gail came up, too. According to the information Lisnette had collected, this was a group called Wolfpack. Their mission was to find a man named Gail Hamilton. Apparently Princess Cara was desperate to locate him. They say he's the one who created that powerful artifact everyone was talking about. One of the other spies found it hard to believe, an artifact maker running from an elite team. Who was that guy? Lisnette admitted he didn't know much, but what she knew was that he was smart. She found out Gail was a member of the same rank team, but now he had completely disappeared. There were no real clues about him, just gossip about how his projects were bad and other random trivialities. Lisnette was convinced that all this nonsense was to deceive people and hide Gail's true identity as the creator of the artifact. To her, Gail was like a ghost. She didn't even know what he was doing before all this. The idea of being fooled like that made her feel sick. Still, the information they were collecting about the Wolfpack team can still lead somewhere useful. If they could get the slightest clue as to where Gail was, it would be worth hearing the ramblings of the party. Once Wolfpack started moving, Lisnette's group would follow. They planned to track them down and take Gail the moment he was found. His team was also helping with their limited budget, pooling the resources they could. Inside, Lisnette was burning with rage. She cursed Gail Hamilton with all her heart. Meanwhile, at the bottom of Smith's Guild, the sound of metal shock echoed loudly through the workshop. Maura was watching Gail as he moved on a project. Gail was wondering if it was time to tell her something important. He turned to her and said he was grateful for the help she gave him during the search for Dios Mind. That mission had nothing to do with her, but he involved her. He was very grateful. Having her around made him feel more confident. Maura's face turned red with shame. In her mind, it was like being hit with a sudden emotional fastball. Gail reached out, and Maura tried to look confident. She reminded him it was one of the capital's top 5 backup mags. There was no one she couldn't help. That was her job, at least until Gail had his own shop in a better part of town. Gail agreed with her, saying that thanks to her help, her dream of running a proper store was finally coming true. Maura blushed even more and with a shy smile, suggested that maybe she could continue to support him as well. So Gail sneezed all of a sudden. Maura scolded him, reminding him to turn his face when he sneezed. Gail apologized and said he didn't know why he sneezed so much. Maybe people were spreading rumors about him. Shireena went into the workshop and said the sneeze was probably because of the mental dust entering her nose. Gail was surprised and happy to see Shireena. He said the workshop she lent him was a big help. Shireena asked if the item Gail was working on was a finished play. Gail replied that it was, and that he had built it exactly at her request, but he thought it looked kind of stupid. Shireena replied that if he thought it was ridiculous, it probably meant that most people wouldn't think so. Gail was confused and screamed, asking what that meant. Shireena wanted to know how the device worked. Gail asked her to turn it in. When she turned the key, it suddenly made a strange sound. That's when Gail explained what he did. He fired a bolt of petrification, fed by an organ of a rooster, a magical creature. Shireena quickly dodged herself, frustrated by Gail's activation while pointing at her. She reminded him how dangerous it was, especially since she had been petrified once before. Gail, not too worried, said he could remove the curse again. Still, he wondered if anything like this was useful. Shireena, on the other hand, saw it as a brilliant and practical invention. She reminded him of the basic rules of supply and demand. They looked around. The area was mainly plains, mountains, and forests. While there were rocks around, they couldn't just dig up the city. Getting a good stone or metal was very difficult. But if someone got the right kind of stone, it would sell for a high price. She even pointed to a drawing she made, showing how the deserts had no building materials. That made Gail wonder what kind of situation they were getting into. Shireena kept asking what someone would do if they wanted to build a stone structure in a desert. Gail figured they'd have to solidify sand in bricks, get them off the ground, or transport them from afar. Shireena agreed. Those were the typical options. But each of them came with serious problems. Making bricks required extra water and materials, which were hard to find. Digging was forced labor, and carrying heavy materials at long distances was not practical. Gail got it. Maura added that in a desert, it was hard to make strong bricks, and water was too valuable to waste. That's when Shireena pointed to the petrification beam. What if they had this? Gail understood what you meant. If they packed sand in a mold and then hit it with the beam, they would have solid stone bricks immediately. Maura got it too fast. Shireena told Gail that while he had incredible craft skills, he had no idea how to use them effectively. That comment made Gail blush. Shireena explained more. In agriculture, there was a serious shortage of stone materials. You can dig them up or get them out of the mines. But no method gave them the quality they needed. With this tool, this whole problem can be solved. If it worked well, Gail could make a lot of money out of it. Gail wasn't sure yet. But Shireena repeated herself. He had talent. Real talent. But it doesn't make sense, Gail insisted. Maura joked that he also had no ability to read the mood of a room. Shireena admitted she wasn't interested in cursed things. But she found this one surprisingly cool. Gail smiled shyly for his compliment. Shireena smiled, calling him an idiot just because she liked one of his cursed tools. So she mentioned they had material from another cockatrice. I could. Did Gail do another one of those devices, without any extra tricks this time? She added that using rooster chicks for materials would not work. Gail agreed. He had tried before, but the organs of the young creatures were not developed enough. Their tail had poison, but it wasn't the kind fed by curses. Shireena joked that a poison maker would be nice, but you couldn't have it all. Gail wanted to know if a poison device would be useful. After all, it was just poison. Shireena pointed out that they were in an agricultural region. There were tons of pests and insects to deal with. The right kind of poison may even be useful for hunting. She guessed Gail didn't know how to use poisons effectively. Gail offered to do something for her if she wanted to. That surprised Shireena. Gail explained that it was not difficult if he had the right material. He made poisonous talismans all the time. Shireena was still not sure if he was serious and asked what kind of materials he needed. Gail listed some. Gulls of gulls poison, the stomachs of undead creatures, mummy dressings and zombie clothes. All this was useful for making talismans. Shireena pointed out they weren't easy to get. Gail agreed. He rarely saw them for sale. So he went to get them himself. After hearing all this, Shireena was convinced that he could actually do it. She got excited and said she'd ask Gimli to help get the materials they needed. She also told Gail to use the things he had already collected and build what came to mind. She promised to buy everything he did for a fair price. Gail took a bottle of weird perfume. The moment the girls opened, they realized it smelled awful. Shireena guessed she used zombie intestines, but Gail cleared it up. Actually, it was from a ghost. Maura didn't even want to ask what else she could do. Shireena, getting a little angry, told him to do what she asked. She gave him a stack of papers, like a list of orders. Gail, blushing again, got excited and said he would start immediately. Shireena said she was looking forward to seeing him and took the cockatrice device with her, planning to get used to how it worked. Gail agreed. Maura offered to join Shireena, thinking she'd have trouble opening doors while carrying the big device. Shireena provoked her, asking why she was still around. Maura admitted she just wanted to see Gail. There was no good search for her today. Shireena laughed, saying she was only joking, and mentioned that Gail and Maura were completing missions together as a temporary team. Gimli was happy to see some old cases finally solved. If Gail and Maura were starting to feel comfortable living here, Shireena thought she couldn't ask for anything more. Laughing loudly filled the inside of the carriage as Kush and his feast celebrated. He joked about how royalty didn't play. They had a huge account in the stores, but nobody seemed to care. Kush proudly showed the sword he bought, a beautiful mitral blade worth 500 gold coins. Melissa had chosen a weapon made from a wyvern bone. Norris was excited about his new magic book and his team, which now let him cast spells quickly and blow up powerful magic with ease. Luke equipped himself with armor made from the skin of a magical beast. Kush pointed out that it didn't matter whether Gail cursed his items or not. With this kind of equipment, their party could finally unleash all its power. Nothing could stand in their way now. The whole group laughed again, but then Kush calmed them down. There was something bothering him. If their party was so powerful, why did no new support member join them? Norris remembered they were a Shrank party. Few adventurers could follow your level. Luke added that this is why they had to settle for people like Gail and Maura in the first place. Other people in the carriage whispered behind their backs, saying that no one in their right mind would want to join people like Kush's team anyway. Kush shrunk and said that in the end, money could fix everything. He turned to other people sharing the carriage with them and called one of the quiet ones. He asked the dark girl and her group to remember his party about their jobs. One of the hooded figures pulled her hood. It was Lisnette. She politely smiled and explained that she and her team were hired to apply items and debuffs to the Shrank Wolfpack, acting as substitutes for her usual support team. They were also in charge of transporting equipment and supplies. Kush agreed to your summary. It was the only reason they were there. He joked that he was lucky his party was generous enough to help poor people like Lisnette's group, since they clearly had no money. Lisnette had a fake laugh, but deep down, she was boiling with rage. She swore to herself she'd get revenge. One of her subordinates quietly reminded her that they had to be patient. His goal was to find the artifact maker. Lisnette admitted that at least being close like this gave them the perfect chance to observe everything. Another teammate sighed, unfortunately agreeing that Kush was right about one thing. They really were poor. Lisnette smoked quietly. In her mind, she was already planning how to completely destroy Kush and his team. Meanwhile, Melissa decided it was time to eat and drink until they reached the farm. Kush called Lisnette again, asking her to bring a bag. They put all the fancy food and wine on a table in the carriage. Kush smiled, saying Princess Cara was paying for everything. Would they believe their luck? One of the others said Kush didn't have to rub it. They already knew. The route was also panoramic, passing through the central agricultural region of the kingdom. Lisnette, still calm on the surface, asked to confirm that they had officially accepted an escort mission to this caravan going to the farm. She warned you that drinking too much can interfere with your duties. Kush came back to her, telling her to be quiet. He said just seeing her dark face made the wine look bad. He told her to throw a tarp at herself like the rest of her group. Kush's group laughed at the insult while Lisnette whispered silently to his team. She listed all the things she still needed: accommodation, information, communication with the Empire, and so many other rising expenses. One of his companions added that Kush's group was not about to share anything with them, not even a single coin. At least the tavern they stopped before gave them some free meals. Suddenly a loud scream echoed in the air. It was an acute, unnatural and alarming tweet. Lisnette's group immediately remained silent. Something was coming. Outside, the caravan guards raised their voices, warning everyone that monsters were approaching. Mercenaries were ordered in their combat formations. Adventurers were warned to protect the wagons. Confused voices asked where the enemy was. Everyone turned to the forest. That's where the sound came from. And then the monsters appeared, a whole horde, coming out of the trees together. The mercenaries shouted, trying to keep everyone calm. After the recent orc attack, the caravan brought in more guards. They should be ready, but monsters beat hard and fast. In an instant, the first wagon was thrown into the air as if it weighed nothing. A watchman reported that they saw the monster leader attacking. It was a Bahamoth, a monster classified as Shrank. Normally, these creatures never left the border between the Empire and the Kingdom. Back in the carriage, Lisnette reminded her group that they were trained to fight people, not monsters. Lisnette quickly assessed the situation. If they tried to confront the monsters directly, they'd probably lose. She saw killer wolves, huge boars, and red grizzly bears mixed with the horde. They were all powerful monsters classified as B or even larger. Running away may be your only option. She looked back and saw Kush's party still laughing and playing, completely unconscious of danger. Tom was running out. They needed to escape or act now. But his mission was critical, and unfortunately, Kush's group was the only clue to that. Frustrated, Lisnette swore without breath, then ordered his subordinates to prepare to retreat if things went wrong, but to fight the monsters as much as they could. Her team waved at understanding. Still, a question bothered her. Shouldn't there be a monster hunt sent by the Empire? Why haven't these beasts been cared for? One of his team members explained that a similar search had been issued in the kingdom as well, but the adventurers who took the job, a supposed Shrank party, cancelled the mission right after accepting it. Lisnette was furious. What kind of irresponsible adventurers would do something like that? So you hit her, some stupid Shrank party. She slowly turned to look at Kush group again, putting the pieces together. It can't be, can it? The subordinate asked what they should do with Kush team. Lisnette made a decision. If they really were a party Shrank, then they had the power to take on a behemoth. And now, like it or not, they were technically part of the same team. She forced them to fight, whether they liked it or not, for the sake of her own crew. A loud cry suddenly echoed through the caravan. Someone was screaming about a behemoth. Luke from Kush's group finally noticed something was wrong. He looked around, but Lisnette and his team had already disappeared. Lisnette's voice screamed dramatically, and Kush reacted angrily by hitting her, thinking she was lamenting. But she kept pretending. Luke mentioned how high things were getting out there. Norris answered, realizing that something was wrong. The wagon was no longer moving. They peeked outside and they saw the driver was gone. And then it happened. A gigantic mouth opened in front of the carriage. Norris and Luke froze with fear, completely shocked. Meanwhile, Lisnette thought of something she had heard before. Orc attacked Kush's group. Makes sense now. The orcs were probably expelled from their territory by this very Bahamoth. Forced to flee, they ended up near the highway, where they attacked the wagon. That showed how powerful this monster really was. Strong enough to cause chaos in miles. The ground trembled as the massive creature roared. Inside the wagon, Kush shouted by surprise when the whole carriage was thrown around. Everyone inside fell and beat each other up. Outside, Lisnette and his team jumped out of the wagon with the grace practiced, landing firmly on his feet. In contrast, Kush's party fell to the ground in a pile. Lisnette turned around and scolded them, thinking that if they really were a Shrank team, they should at least know how to avoid being knocked down like that. So the behemoth growled. His voice was deep and terrifying. He opened his mouth and roared again, so tall, it seemed to rip the air. Lisnette shook. The sound was more than just loud. That was impressive. It seemed that the world itself was breaking under the force of that roar. While chaos unfolded outside, Kush was frozen with fear, unable to believe what he saw. His brain moved for an answer. What was that monster? Melissa tried to guess. Maybe a giant boar, or a cow, or even a rhinoceros. None of this felt right. Lisnette, though I knew. Kush's whole group stayed there, stunned and useless. Norris, looking at the massive creature, commented how unfair it was for something so muscular to be so fast. Even Luke was shaking. Lisnette knew, no doubt. It was a Bahamoth, and not just any monster. That was the target their mission was being built for. The performance reached Kush's party. They were shocked and confused. Luke didn't even want to ask how Lisnette knew about it. But now that he had seen, this was really a Bahamoth. Norris, still trying to stay calm, laughed nervously. Sure, it was a little bigger than expected, but they were Shrank adventurers, right? Surely this thing wasn't a real threat. Close people began murmuring, pointing to Kush's group. It was the famous pack of wolves, the legendary Shrank team. Your presence has brought hope to the caravan. People were rooting now. Smile on the faces of the party, proud and convinced of all the attention. One of Lisnette's subordinates was impressed. Only their presence had raised everyone's spirits. Another whispered that they should prepare support items for the party. So without warning, Bahamoth was loaded. Kush's group called their attack as if they were the heroes of a great battle, claiming they were about to release the combined force of the capital's strongest team. Lisnette's heart beat with emotion. Finally, she'd see the full strength of a Shrank party. But it didn't. On a large swing of his tail, the Bahamoth casually eliminated the entire pack of wolves. They were dropped flying like dolls. Everyone watching, including the mercenaries, Lisnette's team. And Lisnette herself was silent. She couldn't believe it. Was that really all the strength the Shrank team had? Now Bahamoth has turned his attention to them. The panic exploded on the battlefield. People started running into the woods, hoping to escape the monster's wrath. Lisnette cursed. They could get carried away. Your subordinate reassured her. They still had escape routes and attack prepared. But Lisnette hesitated. Could they really run away now, even if it meant abandoning their mission. She remembered the prince. The idea of quitting made her sick. She refused to be turned into a joke. She squeezed the dagger hard. They weren't just any group. They were the best in the Empire, their deadliest team of killers. She gave the order to draw weapons. As much as she hated it, they fought. They would protect Kush's useless team and finish the job. But most of all, they wouldn't let anyone know who they really were. Her team agreed without question. A monster attack came towards her, but she escaped easily. She declared she would deal with Bahamoth and told the team to prepare the setup she needed. Her subordinate wished her luck, hoping everyone would survive. Bahamoth let out another ferocious growl. Using the forest cover, Lisnette went into action. It moved quickly and quietly, casting itself above the beast, aiming for a vulnerable place. She attacked what should have been a blind spot. But Bahamoth moved, it diverted her. She realized the terrible truth. This thing didn't see it as a human. It didn't depend on sensitive eyes or predictable patterns. It was much more advanced, and like a monster shrank, stealth attacks were almost useless. She made a decision. A direct attack may be the only way. She grabbed your bone dagger. It was ensnared with a powerful poison that worked instantly. If she got a clean hit, it would be enough to kill even something that strong. She turned forward and kicked the behemoth. But again her tail broke and knocked her down. Still, she saw your chance, a little opening. She pointed to the monster's throat, waiting to open it. She entered the perfect position and cut. But it didn't work. The dagger couldn't drill the hideout. Lisnette quickly pulled back, thinking fast. His throat was too stiff. But the eye wouldn't be. She attacked again, this time in the eye. The blade sank. She did it. The monster lost an eye on his poisoned weapon. She thought it was only a matter of time now. The poison would spread. That would numb the creature. It would fall. She wanted to hear the scream. But instead, Behemoth responded with something unexpected. He released a strange breath for her. She thought it was poisonous mist. But something felt she got it. This thing had resistance to poison, which meant the dagger's secret weapon wasn't enough. There was only one option. She'd have to use her last resort, the heart of the devil, a gift from Prince Virial himself. She remembered his words, that when the time comes, she should use it, that it would become your blood, your strength, your muscle, that your body would become the desired vessel. She had no more choices. She would embrace power and become the nightmare Behemoth never predicted.